What's up guys? Welcome to Revenger. What if? We've got something special today. What if Cersei Lannister tried to execute Naruto and the Kyuubi awakened and reduced King's Landing to ash? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. Chapter 1, The Stranger at the Gate. The dimensional rift opened over the Blackwater Bay at dawn, and nobody saw it except a drunk fisherman who later told the story so many times that people stopped believing him entirely. It was a small tear at first, a seam in the air roughly 6 feet off the surface of the water, crackling with blue-white light that had no business existing anywhere near King's Landing. The fisherman, whose name was Pell and whose boat smelled strongly of cheap wine and yesterday's catch, watched it with the particular wide-eyed focus of someone whose brain had decided that sobriety was suddenly, urgently necessary. The light pulsed. The tear widened. And then something came through it fast enough that Pell only caught an impression of orange and blonde before whatever it was hit the water 30 yards from his boat with a splash that sent a wave rocking him sideways. Pell waited. The water settled. Then a head broke the surface. Blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and an expression of someone who had just realized they had no idea where they were but was already deciding it was probably fine. "Huh," said Naruto Uzumaki. He treaded water for a moment, looking around at the harbor, the walls, the city climbing the hills in the early morning light. The architecture was wrong, heavy stone and towers, nothing like the clean lines of the Hidden Leaf, nothing like anything he'd seen in the lands of Fire Country or Wind Country or anywhere during the war. The ships in the harbor were wooden-hulled and broad, rigged with sails furled against morning wind. People on the docks were starting their day. He could see tiny figures moving, crates being shifted, voices carrying faint across the water. He looked back at where the rift had been. Gone. Sealed like it had never existed. "Well," said a deep voice at the back of his skull, dry as desert sand, "this is new." "Tell me about it," Naruto said, and started swimming toward shore. He dripped his way up a dock ladder with the cheerful ease of someone who had done far more undignified things before breakfast, and stood on the planking wringing water out of his jacket while the dock workers stared at him. He was wearing his standard gear, orange and black jacket, black pants, the leaf headband tied across his forehead, and he was aware, in the vague way he was always aware of things that didn't immediately constitute a threat, that he looked completely insane relative to everyone around him. The dock workers were dressed in rough wool and leather, the colors of mud and labor. Several of them had stopped working. One man had put down a barrel he was rolling and just stood there with his hands on it, staring. Naruto looked down at himself, then back up. He lifted a hand. "Hey." Nobody said anything. "Is this, okay, which country is this? I don't recognize the accent." He glanced around at the ships. The flags meant nothing to him. "Actually, which continent is this?" "You fell through a dimensional rift," Kurama said inside his head. "The more productive question is whether these people are hostile." "They're not hostile, they're just staring." "They're about to be hostile." "Look to your left." Naruto looked left. 3 city guards were approaching at a pace that suggested urgency they were trying to disguise as routine. They wore gold cloaks, actually gold, bright and polished, which Naruto thought was a bold choice for a working uniform, and their hands were resting near their sword hilts with the practiced casualness of men who wanted to look relaxed while being the opposite of relaxed. The one in front was broad-shouldered with a jaw like a spade and the expression of a man who had been assigned the early shift and resented every moment of it. "You," he said, pointing at Naruto. "How'd you get in the water?" "Fell from the sky," Naruto said pleasantly. The guard's jaw tightened. "How did you actually get in the water?" "I'm being serious. There was a rift, like a tear in the air, I came through it. It closed behind me." Naruto looked up at the sky helpfully, as if the rift might have left some kind of mark. "It hadn't." "I know how that sounds. It sounds like you swam into the harbor from outside the chain and you're lying about it." The guard stepped closer. "Where are you from? What's your business in King's Landing?" "King's Landing," Naruto repeated, turning the name over. "Is that where I am?" "Okay. I'm from the land of fire. Village of Konoha, specifically. It's also called the Hidden Leaf Village, though I guess that doesn't help if you don't know where. Hidden Leaf. The guard said it the way people say things they don't believe. Never heard of it. Yeah, I'm getting that impression. Naruto glanced at the other two guards, who had flanked him while he was talking. He noticed. He always noticed. He just didn't particularly care. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to figure out where I am and how to get home. Is there someone in charge I can talk to? The guard with the jaw stared at him for a long moment, stared at the whisker marks on his cheeks, at the headband, at the general impossibility of him, and made a decision. Yeah, he said. There is. Come with us. Naruto fell into step between them without complaint, still wringing water out of his sleeve cuff. You are walking into custody, Kurama observed. I'm walking toward information, Naruto corrected. Same direction, different meaning. Optimist. You love it. The guard in front glanced back at him with an expression that suggested he'd heard Naruto talking but hadn't seen anyone to talk to. Naruto smiled at him. The guard looked forward again very quickly. King's Landing was extraordinary and terrible at the same time. Naruto walked through it, actually walked, because the guards weren't rushing him and he wasn't pretending not to look, and took it all in with the focused attention of someone who had learned that knowing your environment was the difference between winning and losing. The streets were loud and narrow in the lower city, packed with vendors and beggars and children running errands, and it smelled like every city smelled, bread and waste and animals and people crowded too close together. But there was something underneath all of it, something in the way people moved and kept their eyes down and stepped out of the path of the gold cloaks without being asked, that set a low, steady warning humming at the back of Naruto's mind. These people were afraid. Not of him, of the city itself. Of the order it ran on. He filed that away and kept walking. The Red Keep was not subtle. It sat on the hill above everything else like it was making a point, red stone towers catching the morning sun in a way that might have been beautiful if the whole construction hadn't also read as an implicit threat. Naruto walked through the outer gates looking up at it with genuine interest, and the guards who saw him, a wet stranger in bizarre orange clothing being escorted by the gold cloaks, stared with the same wide-eyed blankness as the dock workers had. Like they were looking at something they didn't have a category for. He was put in a small room off the main corridor, not a cell, just a room with a door and a guard on the outside, and given a dry cloth to wipe his face with, which he appreciated. He sat on the edge of a bench and looked at the stone ceiling and waited with the kind of patience that only people who have fought wars develop. Real patience. Not the nervous, teeth-grinding kind. What are you thinking? Kurama asked. That these people have never seen a shinobi before, Naruto said quietly. Which either means this is a different world entirely, or it's a part of our world that's been so isolated that, it's a different world, Kurama said, with the certainty of something very old. I can feel it. The natural energy here is different. Not wrong, but foreign. Like a different dialect of the same language. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Can I get home? Eventually. The rift that brought you here wasn't random, those things leave traces. But it may take time to find the return path. Okay, Naruto said. He said it simply, without drama, because that was how he processed things that couldn't be immediately solved. Accept, adapt, move forward. Then I'm here for a while. Good to know. The door opened. Tyrion Lannister came in the way he did everything, ahead of his reputation, which he'd learned was the only way to manage it. He stopped just inside the door, looked at the young man sitting on the bench, and spent several seconds conducting the thorough, rapid assessment that his sister would never credit him with being capable of. Orange clothing. Blonde hair. Marks on his cheeks that were not tattoos and not scars, more like something between the two, 3 lines on each cheek that looked almost like whiskers. A headband with a metal plate bearing a symbol Tyrion had never seen. Lean and fit in the particular way of someone who moved for a living, not just trained. And eyes, the most startling part, blue as a clear sky in summer, looking back at him with an expression that Tyrion, after a moment, recognized as simple, genuine curiosity. Not hostility. Not fear. Not the calculated subservience of someone who'd been dragged before Lannister power and was trying to figure out how to survive it. Just curiosity. Tyrion found that unexpectedly refreshing. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" Naruto asked. "I was told a madman fell from the sky and started talking to himself." Tyrion moved to the opposite bench and sat, folding his hands. "I expected someone who looked considerably more unhinged." "I wasn't talking to myself," Naruto said. Tyrion waited. Naruto looked at him steadily, clearly deciding whether to explain, and then apparently deciding he had no reason not to. "I have he paused, searching for the right word, "a partner. Inside my head. We talk." Tyrion absorbed this. A lesser man would have immediately concluded this confirmed the madman theory. Tyrion Lannister had read enough history and enough of what passed for arcane philosophy in the Citadel's more unusual collections to know that there were more things in this world than most people allowed for. He filed the information away. "My name is Tyrion Lannister," he said. "I am the Hand of the Queen. You're in King's Landing, which is the capital of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, and you are currently the most interesting thing that has happened here since the last time something interesting happened, which was recently and unpleasant. What's your name?" "Naruto Uzumaki." He said it without hesitation, without qualification. "I'm from the Hidden Leaf Village. Konoha. The word in your language would be something like warrior, I think." "A ninja." "A ninja," Tyrion repeated, tasting the word. "I don't know that word." "No, I figured you wouldn't." Naruto glanced at the door. "Am I under arrest?" "Not formally." "You are being," Tyrion chose his words with the care of a man who understood that precision mattered, "assessed." "By who?" "My sister. The Queen." "Okay." Naruto leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "Is she going to take long?" "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Tyrion stared at him. Then, against his better judgment, he laughed, a real one, short and sharp. "I'll see what I can do," he said, standing. He got to the door and paused with his hand on it. "A piece of advice, Naruto Uzumaki. When you meet my sister, he considered, careful with your honesty. She doesn't always appreciate it." Naruto tilted his head slightly. "I've met people like that before. I doubt you've met anyone quite like Cersei Lannister." Naruto smiled, and it was a strange smile, warm, a little rueful, knowing. "You might be surprised," he said. Tyrion looked at him for one more moment. Then he left. "He's intelligent," Kurama said, after the door closed. "Yeah," Naruto agreed. "And he's worried. Not about me, about whatever this queen is going to do." "Interesting distinction." "That's what I thought." Food arrived before Cersei did, bread and meat and a flask of something that turned out to be wine, which Naruto tasted and then set aside, never having developed a taste for alcohol. He ate quickly and thoroughly, the way he always did, and by the time the guard opened the door again he was standing, alert, and had already mapped every exit from the room including 2 that weren't doors. The woman who entered was not what he expected, which he acknowledged to himself was a failure of expectation management on his part. Cersei Lannister was tall, golden-haired, and dressed in black that made her hair look like fire. She moved like the room belonged to her, which it did, technically, with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never had to justify their presence anywhere. 2 guards followed her in. Jaime Lannister came behind them, one hand loose near his sword hilt, watching Naruto with the careful, professional attention of a real fighter assessing an unknown variable. Naruto noticed the sword hand. He noticed Jaime the way you noticed other skilled people, instinctively, the body recognizing before the mind had consciously processed it. Cersei stopped several feet away and looked at him. The look was not hostile, not warm. It was the look of a woman cataloging an object, efficient, thorough, and comfortable with the distance it required. "You are the one they pulled from the harbor," she said. "Naruto Uzumaki," he confirmed. "And you're the queen." "I am." A pause. "You don't bow." "Should I?" He wasn't being rude about it, the question was genuine. "Where I'm from, I don't bow to many people. It's nothing personal." Jaime made a small sound that might have been a suppressed cough. Cersei's eyes moved to him briefly, then returned to Naruto. "Where you're from," she said. "The Hidden Leaf Village." "My brother's account." The name sat in her mouth like something she didn't know whether to swallow or spit out. "I have never heard of this place." "I know. I've figured out that this is a different world from mine." He said it plainly, like it was a navigational fact rather than an existential catastrophe. "I'm not here by choice. Something pulled me through. I need to find the way back eventually, but right now I just need to understand where I am." Cersei studied him for a long moment. "What are you?" she asked, and the question was precise, not who, but what. "A shinobi," Naruto said. "A ninja." He considered, "a soldier, I guess, though that doesn't quite cover it. A soldier from a country no one has ever heard of, who fell from the sky." Her tone was uninflected. "And those marks on your face? Born with them? And that," she indicated the headband, "symbol. My village's symbol. Like a coat of arms, sort of." Cersei was quiet. In the silence, Naruto could feel Kurama's attention sharpening, not alarm, just the particular focus that came when the old fox was paying close attention. "She doesn't believe you," Kurama said. "But that's not the important thing. The important thing is that she's already decided what to do with you." "What's that?" "She hasn't decided yet. She's deciding right now." Cersei took a slow step to her right, moving around him slightly in the way that people did when they were trying to see you from a different angle without making it obvious that they were doing it. Naruto tracked her without turning his head, which he thought was probably obvious and decided he didn't much care. "You're not afraid," she said. "No. You should be." "Maybe," he acknowledged. "But I'm not." "Is that a problem?" Something moved in her eyes, something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite admiration, something caught in between. She stopped moving. "You will remain in the keep," she said, "as my guest, while I determine the truth of your story." "Guest," said Kurama, with the ancient, dry skepticism of something that had been alive long enough to know exactly what that word meant when powerful people used it. Naruto smiled at the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. "Sure," he said. "Thank you." Cersei turned and left. The guards fell in behind her. Jaime was last, and he paused at the door for just a moment, long enough to give Naruto a look that was hard to read. Not quite warning. Not quite apology. Something layered. Then he was gone. Naruto looked at the empty doorway. "This is going to be interesting," he said. "You have a gift for understatement," Kurama replied. The chambers they put him in were on the third floor of a tower that overlooked the inner yard of the Red Keep. Naruto took a tour of the room, the window, the corridor outside, and the two guards stationed at the end of that corridor, and then came back and sat on the windowsill with one leg hanging out over the 40-foot drop to the cobblestones below, which seemed to distress the guard posted nearest his door more than was probably comfortable. The city spread out below and beyond the walls. He could see the harbor from up here, the bay glittering in the now full morning sun, boats moving in slow arcs. Further out, the sea. He let himself feel the natural energy of the place, reached for it the way he would have reached for sage chakra, and found Kurama's description accurate. It was different. Rich, in some ways, older than anything in their world, earth and stone layered with something deep and slow and vast. But the shape of it was unfamiliar, like music played in a scale he didn't quite know. "Can you draw on it for sage mode?" Kurama asked. With time, yeah. It'll take a little calibration. He glanced at the guard, who was now staring at Naruto's hanging leg with the expression of a man experiencing a low-level professional crisis. Don't worry about that for now. We're not in a fight. Not yet. You're a pessimist. Naruto pulled his leg back in and hopped off the sill. The Queen, Cersei, she's going to try to find out what I can do, right? Before she decides what to do with me. Yes. She wants to know if you're a weapon she can use or a threat she needs to neutralize. Those are the only two options she's considering. That's the only lens she has. A pause, and something in Kurama's voice that might have been something like sadness, if you knew him well enough to hear it. Humans who think only in terms of power and threat cannot imagine a third option. Naruto sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his hands. Outside, King's Landing was busy and loud and entirely unaware that anything unusual had happened. He thought about the people he'd seen in the streets, the way they moved, heads down, careful. The fear that lived in the city's bones. We're not going to be here forever, he said quietly. We'll find the way back. But while we're here, I'm not going to pretend I can't do what I can do, Naruto said. And I'm not going to let someone push me into a corner and stay there. Kurama made a sound that was low and warm and entirely characteristic, the sound of a 9,000-year-old fox who had spent most of those years furious at the world and had, against all probability, found something worth protecting in it. Obviously, he said. The small council met at midday, and Naruto knew about it because Tyrion came to find him first. He appeared at the door with a bottle of wine in one hand and 2 cups in the other, took one look at Naruto sitting cross-legged on the floor doing something Tyrion couldn't categorize, eyes closed, posture relaxed, a faint charge in the air around him like the feeling before lightning, and waited politely until whatever it was finished. Naruto opened his eyes. The charge dissipated. Sorry. Come in. You were meditating, Tyrion said, stepping in and closing the door behind him. The guard outside made a noise. Tyrion ignored it with practiced ease. Sort of. Calibrating. Naruto stood in one smooth motion and took the cup Tyrion offered him without thinking about it, then looked at the wine and set it on the table. I should tell you I don't drink. A tragedy. Tyrion filled his own cup and sat. There's to be a small council meeting this afternoon. My sister is going to present you as a matter requiring official discussion. What does that mean for me? It means her advisors are going to argue about what to do with you while she sits at the head of the table and has already decided. Tyrion drank. I wanted to give you the context before you went in. Naruto sat across from him. She's not sure if I'm a weapon or a threat. Tyrion blinked. He paused, a very accurate reading of her position, yes. How did you? I've met people who think that way before. Naruto picked up the cup, turned it in his hands, set it back down. Not enemies, necessarily. Just people who only see power dynamics. Tyrion studied him. You're quite young to be so relaxed about it. I've been in harder rooms, Naruto said simply. And there was something in the way he said it, not boasting, just factual, that made Tyrion believe him entirely. What are the other people on this council like? Kevin Lannister is my uncle. Reliable, cautious, not cruel. Grand Maester Pycelle is old, slow, and will say whatever keeps him alive. Lord Qyburn, Tyrion's voice changed, just slightly, on that name, is my sister's creature. Brilliant and immoral in equal measure. And there's Ser Gregor Clegane outside the room, which is less a member of the council and more a threat my sister keeps visible to remind everyone else what the cost of disagreement is. Naruto absorbed this. The Mountain, he said. Tyrion froze. How do you know that name? I don't. I'm guessing, if he's being used as a visible threat, he's probably large. Mountains are the thing people compare large things to. He caught Tyrion's expression. I'm right? Distressingly so. Tyrion exhaled. Naruto Uzumaki, I'm going to ask you something directly and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Okay. How dangerous are you, actually? The question hung in the air. Naruto looked at Tyrion, really looked at him, the same way Tyrion had assessed him that morning, and Tyrion had the strange sensation of being read very quickly and very accurately. Dangerous enough, Naruto said. But not to anyone who doesn't come at me first. And if someone does come at you? A pause. Not hesitation, calculation. Then it depends on how stupid they are about it. Tyrion nodded slowly. He picked up his wine. I am going to try, he said, to make sure this goes in a direction that doesn't require us to find out. He drank. This is, historically speaking, the direction my efforts usually go, followed by my sister deciding to do something I cannot stop. That sounds exhausting. It is, Tyrion agreed, with the feeling of someone who had made peace with a particular exhaustion a very long time ago. It genuinely is. The small council chamber was a round room with a round table and the very specific atmosphere of a place where power was discussed but not shared. Naruto walked in between two guards and looked around at the faces arranged there, Cersei at the head, Tyrion to one side, an old man in maester's robes who Naruto pegged as Pycelle immediately, a broad-shouldered man who was probably the uncle, and a lean, gray-eyed figure at the far side of the table who looked at Naruto with the particular interest of a man who found unusual things professionally useful. That one, Naruto thought, was Qyburn. Outside the door, he'd felt the presence before he'd seen it, a massive, wrong-feeling thing in the corridor, something that hit his senses the way dark chakra did, distant and cold. He'd walked past the mountain without looking at him directly and noted two things, that Ser Gregor Clegane was somewhere between 7 and 8 feet tall and built like a fortress wall, and that whatever he was now, he wasn't entirely natural. Something had been done to him. Interesting, Kurama had said. Yeah, Naruto had agreed. He stood at the foot of the table now and looked at Cersei, who was already watching him. Sit, she said. I'll stand, thanks. A pause. Grand Maester Pycelle made a soft, disapproving sound. Kevan Lannister's expression didn't change. Qyburn's eyes sharpened slightly with what looked like appreciation. You claim to be from another world, Cersei said. I claim that because it's true. Maester Pycelle. She didn't look away from Naruto. Your assessment. The old maester folded his hands on the table and assumed the expression of a man delivering a studied opinion. The boy is clearly either deluded or lying. There is no such thing as travel between worlds. The marks on his face are likely tattoos applied in childhood, the headband is foreign-made but unremarkable in its craftsmanship, and his clothing, while strange, is not supernatural. My assessment is that he is a foreign spy from an unknown location, possibly from Essos, whose people have an odd tradition of, he walked on the surface of the bay, said one of the guards who'd brought Naruto in. The man looked immediately as if he regretted saying it. Before he entered the harbor. When we first spotted him, he was running on the water. Moving fast. The room went quiet. Naruto, who had indeed jogged across the last 50 yards of water to the dock ladder because swimming in gear was tedious, said nothing. He walked on water, Pycelle said flatly. Ran, really, Naruto said. Walking on water takes more concentration. Pycelle stared. Kevan Lannister's expression changed for the first time, a slight tightening around the eyes, something between alarm and calculation. Demonstrate, Cersei said. Naruto looked at her for a moment, then picked up the pitcher of water on the table, held it over his palm, and poured a small amount. He focused a thread of chakra to the surface of his skin, nothing dramatic, nothing visible except for the water pooling in his cupped hand and then, instead of draining between his fingers, staying there, held by the same principle of chakra adhesion that let him walk on water, on walls, on ceilings. He tilted his hand. The water stayed. Qyburn leaned forward. Pycelle made a sound that he quickly turned into a cough. Tyrion watched with the expression of a man confirming a suspicion he'd already had. How, Kevin Lannister said. Energy control, Naruto said, and lowered his hand, letting the water fall. Everyone has this energy, it's inside you, it flows through the world. Most people just don't know how to use it. Where I'm from, we learn to. Sorcery, Pycelle said, with the forced certainty of a man trying to put something into a category that would make it manageable. No, Naruto said. Not sorcery. It's physical. Like your muscles, except instead of making your body move, it makes it do other things. And what other things, Cersei said, does it make your body do? Naruto looked at her steadily. There was a quality to his stillness that the room was starting to register, the way an absolutely calm person could make a room feel calm around them, except that this particular calm was not relaxed, it was simply unhurried. Like something that had no need to rush. Enough, he said, that I'm not going to make a list. Cersei's eyes held his for a long moment. Are you a threat to my throne? I don't want your throne, Naruto said. I want to find my way home. Those aren't the same question. No, he agreed. But the answer to both is no. Another silence. Tyrion was looking at the table. Qyburn was looking at Naruto with the focused attention of a man watching an experiment. You'll remain in the keep, Cersei said finally, under our hospitality, while we determine the full extent of your, she paused, and the pause was doing a great deal of work, abilities. She's not going to let you leave, Kurama said. I know. She's going to try to understand what you can do. And then decide if she can use you. I know that too. And if she can't use you? Naruto met Cersei's green eyes across the length of the table. He smiled, the same warm, knowing smile he'd given Tyrion that morning, the smile of someone who had been underestimated so many times it had stopped being interesting. Then she'll try something stupid, Naruto said internally, and we'll handle it. Kurama laughed, low and deep and resonant, the kind of laugh that would have vibrated the walls if it had come from an actual throat rather than the inside of Naruto's mind. I almost feel sorry for her, the fox said. Almost, Naruto agreed. He bowed slightly to the room, not the full bow of deference, just the courtesy nod of someone who'd had the meeting they came for, and waited for the guards to show him back to his tower. Above King's Landing, the sky was blue and cloudless, and from the harbor, if you looked at the right angle in the right light, you could still see the faint ghost of a seam in the air where the rift had been. Hell the fisherman was still telling his story at the dockside tavern. Nobody was listening, but he kept telling it anyway. Some things were too strange to keep to yourself. That night, Naruto stood at his window and looked at King's Landing in the dark, the lights and the shadows, the fires and the darkness between them, and thought about what Kurama had said about the natural energy. He reached out again, more carefully, more specifically, the way Fukasaku had taught him to. The world breathed back at him, slow and vast and entirely itself. Different, yes. Foreign, yes. But alive. Genuinely, fully alive. Hey, he said internally. What? Have you ever been in another world before? Kurama was quiet for a moment. No. I have been many things. I have been feared, imprisoned, weaponized, and befriended. I have burned and I have been bound. But I have never been somewhere that was not the world I was born into. How does it feel? Another pause. Strange, Kurama said. And yet the energy is still energy. The sky is still sky. The moon is the same. Something in his voice shifted, the ancient creature contemplating something unexpected. It is the same moon, Naruto. Naruto looked up. The moon hung over King's Landing large and white, same as it always was. Same as it had been the night the Ninetales attacked Konoha, 20 years before he was born. Same as it had been every night of the war. Yeah, he said quietly. Same moon. He didn't feel alone, which he recognized was the only remarkable thing about the moment. In a world that wasn't his, in a keep full of people who were trying to work out how to control him, surrounded by a city built on fear, he didn't feel alone. That was something. He turned away from the window and went to bed, and slept deeply, the way only people who are comfortable with uncertainty can sleep, completely, and without dreams. In the small council chamber, Cersei Lannister sat alone long after her advisors had gone and looked at the table where the water had pooled in a stranger's palm and refused to fall, and thought about what it meant, and what it could do for her, and what would have to be done if it couldn't be made to do anything at all. She was very good at planning. She had been planning against impossible things her entire life. She didn't know, yet, just how badly this particular calibration was going to fail her. Chapter 2, A Guest in Chains. The first morning passed without incident, which Cersei later reflected should have told her something. Naruto was up before dawn. The guard posted outside his door, a young man named Alton who'd drawn the short straw and was still quietly resentful about it, heard movement through the wood, then nothing, and then spent an anxious 20 minutes wondering if the prisoner guessed whatever he was had somehow left before cracking the door open and finding Naruto standing in the middle of the room on one finger. Literally one finger. Right index, pressed against the stone floor, entire body balanced above it in a perfect vertical line, completely still. Alton stared. Naruto opened one eye. Morning. Alton closed the door. He didn't report it, because he had no idea how to write it down in a way that would make him sound like anything other than a man who needed more sleep. By the time proper morning arrived and a servant brought Naruto breakfast, he was sitting normally at the table, reviewing the view from his window with the methodical attention of someone memorizing a map. The servant, a girl of maybe 15 who kept her eyes down, set the tray on the table and turned to leave, and Naruto said, "Thank you," and she stopped like she'd walked into something solid. She looked up at him. Just briefly. Then back down. "You're welcome, my lord," she said, so quietly he almost missed it. "Not a lord," he said. "Just Naruto." "What's your name?" She hesitated at the door. The hesitation was the particular kind that meant she'd been taught not to answer that question, or any question, from the kinds of people who stayed in tower chambers in the Red Keep. "Mira," she said, even more quietly. "Mira. Thanks for the food." He picked up a piece of bread and bit into it. "Do you know if there's a library in this place?" She blinked. Whatever she'd expected the strange foreign prisoner to ask her, it wasn't that. "Yes, my lord, yes. In the East Wing. Maester Pycelle keeps the keys." "Great. Another bite of bread." "Thanks." Mira left. In the corridor, Alton heard her footsteps pause, then continue quickly, like someone who'd had an unexpected interaction and needed time to process it. "You're winning them over," Kurama said. "I'm eating breakfast," Naruto said. "Same thing, with you." Tyrion arrived mid-morning with the air of a man performing a casual visit that he had thought about carefully beforehand. He brought a book, a thick one, leather-bound, with the look of something that had been read multiple times, and set it on the table with the specific deliberateness of a gift being given without being called a gift. "The known history of Westeros," he said. "Since you claim to need orientation." Naruto picked it up. It was heavy. He flipped to the middle and looked at a diagram of the 7 kingdoms, the map, the regions, the named strongholds. He looked at it with the focus of a man committing it to memory, because that was exactly what he was doing. Tyrion watched him. Most people take considerably longer to read a page. "I'm not reading it yet. I'm looking at the shape." Naruto set the book down and tapped the map with one finger. "King's Landing is here. The wall is up here. Everything west of this mountain range is what, different lords. Different lords sworn to different great houses sworn to the crown." "Yes." Tyrion sat. "You grasp political geography quickly for someone who claims to be from a completely different world." "Feudalism isn't specific to one world," Naruto said, which was a more sophisticated observation than Tyrion had braced for. "Wherever you have land, armies, and people who want to control both, you get the same basic structures. The names change." He closed the book. What does your sister think I am? Not the official position. What does she actually think? Tyrion considered lying and decided it would be a waste of both their time. She thinks you are either a sorcerer with capabilities she doesn't understand, or an extremely unusual product of foreign training that has given you abilities that can be explained eventually. Either way, she wants to understand what you can do before deciding whether to attempt to recruit you or eliminate you. Eliminate, Naruto said. Not alarmed, just noting it. It is one of her options. I'd prefer you not be eliminated. I find you interesting. I appreciate that. Naruto leaned back in his chair. For what it's worth, I'm not going to be eliminated. If she tries it, she'll find that out. Tyrion looked at him carefully. You say that with a great deal of confidence for someone who is, he gestured at the room, the guards, the implicit weight of the entire Red Keep above and around them. I know how it looks, Naruto said. Locked in a tower. 2 guards on the door. The mountain in the building somewhere. He met Tyrion's eyes. I'm not being arrogant. I just know what I'm capable of. And what I'm capable of is, not really suited to being locked in a tower. Could you leave? Tyrion asked. The question was genuinely curious, not challenging. Naruto glanced at the window. Right now? Yeah. The guards wouldn't see me go. He looked back at Tyrion. I'm not leaving. I don't have anywhere to go, I don't know this world yet. Staying here gets me information. A slight smile. And honestly, you and your brother are more interesting than an empty road. That's only half true, Kurama said. The road part is the lie. The interesting people part is real. You are a very strange person. Thank you. Tyrion was quiet for a moment. My brother, he said. You've noticed Jaime. Hard not to. Naruto picked up the book again, studying the map. He's a real fighter. The way he moves, he's been in actual combat, not just training. And he watches me like he's trying to figure something out. He paused. He doesn't look at me like a threat. He looks at me like a question. Tyrion said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, a warmth that he was trying not to make obvious, and not entirely succeeding. He's complicated, Tyrion said finally. Most interesting people are, Naruto said. Jaime found him in the afternoon. Not officially, no escort, no announcement, just the sound of footsteps in the corridor that moved differently from the guards and then the door opening without the preliminary knock that servants used or the deliberate entry that Tyrion favored. Jaime came in the way people who owned spaces moved through them, easy and direct, and stopped when he found Naruto sitting on the floor with the history book open in his lap and looking up at him with zero surprise. You were expecting me, Jaime said. I heard you coming about 30 seconds ago, Naruto said. Your footsteps are different from the guards. More even. You're not wearing as much armor. Jaime looked down at himself. Half armor, actually, greaves and bracers but no chest plate, the way you dressed when you were off duty but not entirely. Old habit from a life in a suit of steel. Observant, he said. It's a survival skill. Naruto closed the book. You can sit down if you want. Jaime looked at the available seating, the chair, the bed, the window seat, and chose to lean against the wall near the door, which was the position of a man who wanted the conversation to be casual and the exit to be close. Naruto noticed and did not comment. My brother tells me you can walk on water, Jaime said. And walls, Naruto said. And ceilings, if I'm focused enough. A pause. Show me. Naruto looked at him for a moment, then stood, walked to the nearest wall, stepped sideways onto it, and kept walking, up the vertical surface, 6 steps, until he was standing sideways on the wall with the floor a foot below his boots and the ceiling 2 feet above his head, completely comfortable, like gravity was optional. He looked at Jaime from his sideways vantage point. Jaime was staring, genuinely, openly staring, with the expression of a man who had seen many unusual things and was recalibrating his baseline for what unusual meant. Naruto stepped back down to the floor. "Chakra adhesion," he said. "Energy concentrated in the soles of your feet. You can stick to any surface if the control is fine enough. Can everyone where you're from do that?" "People who've trained for it, yeah. Basic technique." He sat back down. "Not everyone bothers. It's useful, but it takes consistent practice to keep the calibration right." He looked at Jamie curiously. "You're a knight." "King's Guard." The word had a particular weight when Jamie said it, not pride, exactly, but something that had been pride once and was now more complicated. "What does that mean here?" "In my world, a guard commander has a whole," Naruto gestured, "system. Protocols. Oaths." "Oaths," Jamie said, and again that weight. He pushed off the wall and moved further into the room, and now he was pacing, slow, automatic, the movement of a man whose body thought better when it was moving. "The King's Guard swears to protect the king, obey the king, serve the king." He stopped near the window. "There are 7 of us. White cloaks. No lands, no lordships, no wives. Just the oath." "And what happens when the king does something the oath can't cover?" Naruto asked. "Like something the oath itself would be broken by following?" Jamie turned and looked at him. It was a sharp look, sharper than anything he'd shown yet, like Naruto had put a blade somewhere he wasn't expecting it. "What do you know about that?" "Nothing," Naruto said honestly. "But I can hear it in your voice when you say the word oath." He tilted his head. "I've known people who were given impossible choices. Oaths that couldn't be kept in the way they were written because the person who gave you the oath broke something first." He paused. "That's a hard place to live in." The room was quiet. Outside, King's Landing was doing its afternoon business, carts and voices and the distant clatter of the training yard below. "You're perceptive for a," Jamie stopped. "For a what?" "I was going to say, for someone so young, but that seems condescending." He looked at Naruto properly, the face, the eyes, the particular quality of the stillness he carried. "How old are you?" 19. He considered. "Almost 20, actually." "You've seen war," Jamie said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. At 19. It started younger than that." Naruto's voice didn't change, not flat, not emotional, just honest. "There was a war that involved every major village in my world. I was in it from the beginning. Lost people." He picked up the book again. "You know how that is." Jamie was quiet for a moment. "I do," he said. "Then, my sister is going to test you." "I figured. She's going to push. She wants to know your limits." "I don't have useful limits for her to find," Naruto said mildly. Jamie looked at him, and there it was again, that quality that Naruto had noted the night before, that question Jamie couldn't quite form. He was standing in a room with someone who was clearly capable of things he didn't have language for, and unlike his sister, he wasn't trying to categorize it as weapon or threat. He was trying to understand it as a person. "Be careful with her," Jamie said finally. She loves her children. She loved her father, after a fashion. But when she's afraid of something," he stopped. "She doesn't run from it," Naruto said. "She attacks it." Jamie blinked. "Yes. I know the type." Naruto stood and walked to the window, looking out at the yard below. In the training ground, 2 knights were sparring, swords ringing against each other in the methodical way of practice, not real combat. He watched them for a moment. The people who attack what they're afraid of are harder to deal with than people who run. Running gives you distance. Attacking closes it. And you're not afraid of her. No. He glanced at Jamie over his shoulder. Should I be? Jamie thought about it honestly, which was, Naruto reflected, one of the things that made him interesting. He actually thought about it, instead of just giving the expected answer. I don't know, Jamie said, and it was the most genuine thing he'd said in the whole conversation. I don't know what you are. And until I know that, I don't know whether you should be afraid of her or she should be afraid of you. Naruto smiled. He turned back to the window. You'll figure it out, he said. You're smarter than you let people think you are. Jamie stood there for a moment, caught between something, a fence, maybe, or the odd discomfort of being read accurately by a stranger. Then he picked up his sword belt from where he'd set it near the door and left. His footsteps went down the corridor even, unhurried, and Naruto tracked them until they faded. You like him, Kurama said. He's honest, Naruto said. In a place where everyone else is playing angles, he's actually honest. Just, buried under other things. That's not the same as trustworthy. No. But it's the start of something. The testing started that evening. Qyburn came with the formal title of visiting scholar and the practical energy of a man who had been given a problem he found genuinely stimulating. He was accompanied by 2 assistants carrying equipment, instruments of measurement, Naruto assumed, though the tools themselves were unfamiliar, and he sat up at the table with the focused efficiency of someone who did this often. Naruto sat across from him and looked at the instruments. What are you measuring? Everything I can, Qyburn said. He had a light, precise voice and eyes that missed nothing. Your temperature. Your pulse. The field around you, if there is one. He looked up from arranging his tools. There is one, by the way. I can feel it. I've worked with more unusual things than most men, and I have never felt quite that particular. He searched for a word, resonance. Chakra, Naruto said. You're sensitive to it. Is that what you call it? Qyburn seemed genuinely pleased, the way scholars get when the thing they're studying offers them vocabulary. In my work I've encountered what others call magic, or power, or the blessings of gods. I've never found a useful unified framework. Your word might serve better. He settled back. May I? Depends on what you're asking. To observe. To measure what I can. I have no intention of attempting to constrain or harm you, not because I couldn't, but because I suspect you would find it considerably less of an obstacle than the Queen believes, and I prefer to learn from an unfrightened subject. He folded his hands. I am not your enemy, Naruto Uzumaki. I am simply curious. He's the most dangerous one in this building, Kurama said. Not because of what he can do. Because of what he wants to understand. Yeah. But he's being straight with me right now. Be careful with straight-talking people who work for crooked queens. Naruto considered. Then he held out his hand, palm up, and produced a small sphere of chakra, a Rasengan, contained, compressed to the size of a marble, spinning in his palm with a high, clean hum like a mechanical top. Qyburn leaned forward. His eyes went very wide. He reached for one of his instruments, a device with a needle that trembled as he brought it near the spinning sphere, and watched the needle go wild, swinging hard against its limit pin. Extraordinary, he said softly. It's a basic technique, Naruto said. Compressed rotating chakra. It's been built on a lot since my dad invented it. He let it dissolve. I can show you other things. But some things I'm not going to demonstrate in a closed room. Because they're too large. Because they're too large, Naruto confirmed. Qyburn nodded, not pushing. He wrote something in a small book he'd taken from his coat. The marks on your face, he said, without looking up. They're not tattoos. No. Are they connected to your abilities? Naruto paused. Indirectly, he said. They're a marker of something I carry. Something I was born with. It's complicated. Qyburn looked up. I would very much like to know about the complicated thing. I know you would, Naruto said pleasantly. And someday I might tell you about it. But not today. The scholar looked at him for a long moment with the expression of a man recalculating. He'd expected resistance, clearly, the hard-walled resistance of a prisoner or the brittle resistance of someone with something to hide. What he got instead was the easy, warm refusal of someone who had made a decision and wasn't uncomfortable with it. It didn't fit the framework he'd brought to the meeting. He wrote something else in his book. You mentioned, he said carefully, that there is something inside you. Naruto looked at him. Your partner, Qyburn continued. The one you speak with. Careful, Kurama said. I know. Yes, Naruto said. And what is this partner? Naruto smiled. Something you've never encountered before, he said, with a quality in his voice that was not threatening but was, final. Like a door, clearly marked, firmly closed. Qyburn looked at that door, measured it, and decided not to try it tonight. He was many things, and impractical was not one of them. Very well, he said, and moved on to the next measurement. Cersei came to see him at midnight. Not through the official channels, no guards announced, no servants preceding her. She came alone, which was either brave or arrogant or some quality that lived between them, and she knocked once and opened the door without waiting for an answer. Naruto was awake. He'd heard her coming, heard her footsteps, lighter than most in the keep, paced with the discipline of a woman who had spent years navigating stone corridors without wanting to be heard. He was sitting at the window again, the city below him, and he turned when she entered but didn't stand. She noticed. She came into the room and stood near the table and looked at him in the dark and the moonlight and said nothing for a moment. She was in a different dress, darker, simpler, without the full architecture of queenly appearance. Her hair was down. It should have made her look less formidable. It didn't. Qyburn's report was interesting, she said. He's an interesting man. He says you are, not magical. In the way magic is understood here. She paused. He says it's closer to a physical discipline taken to an extreme that has no known upper boundary. That's a pretty accurate description, Naruto said. He also says he couldn't measure what's inside you. Her voice didn't change. That whatever it is, his instruments went beyond their scale when pointed at it. Naruto said nothing. What is it? She asked. Something old, he said. Something powerful. Something that is, mine. Not a threat to you, unless you give it a reason to be. I don't take well to conditional threats. It's not a threat. It's just the truth. He looked at her steadily. Everything I've told you since I got here has been the truth. I know that's probably unusual in your line of work. Cersei looked at him, and in the moonlight her expression was, not the council face, not the queen face. Something more unguarded, and more dangerous for it. Everyone lies, she said. Not everyone. Everyone with power. Everyone who wants something. I don't want anything from you, Naruto said. I want to go home. While I'm here, I prefer not to be treated like a prisoner or a piece on someone's game board. That's all. And if I can't guarantee that, she asked, with the particular directness of a woman who preferred to show you the knife rather than hide it. Then we're going to have a problem, he said simply. And it'll be a problem you started. The room was quiet. Below, King's Landing slept its restless sleep, the city never fully went quiet, always some fire, always some voice. Cersei looked at him and he looked back, and there was something in the space between them that wasn't quite confrontation and wasn't quite respect but was somewhere in the tense, electric territory between. You're not afraid of me, she said, not for the first time. No, he said, not for the first time. Why? And it was genuine, not the queen asking the question, but the person underneath the queen, the one who had learned that fear was the most reliable constant in any room she entered. What are you, that you can look at, all of this, she gestured, meaning the keep, the city, the throne, the full weight of her power, and feel nothing? Naruto thought about it. He gave it real thought, because the question deserved it. I grew up as the thing that scared an entire village, he said. Not me, what I carried. But I was the one they looked at. I was 6 years old and people would cross the street when they saw me. He looked at his hands for a moment, then back up. I spent a long time trying to make people not afraid of me. And then I realized the goal wasn't to manage their fear, it was to just be what I actually am and let people decide what they wanted to do with that. He paused. I'm not afraid of you because fear is a response to something you think can overwhelm you. You can't overwhelm me, Cersei. I don't say that to be insulting. It's just true. Cersei Lannister stood in the moonlit room and listened to this. Her expression was controlled, she was always controlled, but something moved behind her eyes, something that Naruto caught and filed away. Not anger. Not dismissal. Something closer to the expression people had when they heard something that resonated in a place they'd rather it hadn't. She left without responding to it. The door closed. Well, Kurama said. Yeah, Naruto agreed. She's going to do something. I know. Soon. I know that too. He looked at the closed door. She's scared of me. She just can't stop being scared long enough to make a good decision about it. Scared people with power are the most dangerous kind. I know, Naruto said, for the third time. That's why I was a little scared of Tsunade-bachan when I was 12. Kurama made a sound that was halfway between a growl and a laugh and settled somewhere in the middle. 3 days passed. They were strange, lopsided days, part captivity, part curated hospitality, part the particular tension of people circling each other trying to decide what to do next. Naruto read the history book. He learned the major houses, the regions, the broad strokes of the wars. He asked Tyrion about the finer points and Tyrion answered with the pleasure of a scholar finding a genuinely curious student, and sometimes these conversations ran long enough that wine got poured and food got ordered and it stopped feeling like interrogation and started feeling like something else. He met Mira the servant again on his third morning and asked her about the city below, the ordinary parts, the market days, the food, the things that didn't make it into the history books, and she answered carefully at first, then less carefully, then with the specific, vivid detail of someone who actually lived in the city rather than ruling it from above. He learned more about King's Landing from 20 minutes with Mira than from 3 days with Tyrion's book. He did not demonstrate anything more than the basics. Not because he was hiding. Because Qyburn was watching and Qyburn would report everything to Cersei, and there was a calibration problem with showing too much to people who were still deciding whether you were a weapon or a threat. On the 4th day, the tone changed. He felt it in the morning, not chakra sense, not anything specific, just the particular shift in atmosphere that happened in confined spaces when something had been decided and hadn't been announced yet. Alton the guard was stiffer than usual. The servant who brought breakfast wouldn't meet his eyes at all. The sounds of the keep were slightly different, more movement, less casual, the organized quality of preparation. They're moving pieces, Kurama said. I know. Naruto ate his breakfast with the same unhurried focus as always. Something's being set up. Something public, Kurama said. Whatever she's decided, she wants an audience for it. Tyrion came before midday, and for the first time since their first meeting, he didn't have his wine and his comfortable posture and his wry ease. He came in sharp, with the compressed energy of someone who'd been trying to stop something and had run out of time to stop it. She's moving against you, he said, closing the door. I know, Naruto said. Tyrion stopped. You know. The air changed this morning. People are scared in a different way. He looked at Tyrion. What's she planning? A formal proceeding. Tomorrow. Tyrion sat heavily. She's calling it an investigation into an unknown foreign entity of potentially threatening nature, its dressings on a frame she's already built. She has people who will testify that you did things. Threatening things. In their presence. His jaw tightened. Fabricated testimony. For what purpose? To establish grounds for, Tyrion stopped. He looked at his hands. She wants to make an example of you. Before the city. She thinks that if she can be seen to deal decisively with something that can't be explained or controlled, it reinforces her authority in a moment when, he stopped again, there are complications at the moment, politically. Your arrival was poorly timed from her perspective. Naruto looked at him for a long moment. She wants to execute me, he said. Tyrion didn't say anything. Publicly, Naruto said. Tyrion pressed his lips together. And you can't stop it, Naruto said. I have argued against it, Tyrion said. Forcefully. Multiple times. With multiple supporting arguments. She has, not listened. He looked up. I am telling you this because I think you deserve to know it, and because I am asking you, Naruto, I am genuinely asking you, to not do something that levels this building. Naruto looked at him for a moment. Then he said, I'm not going to hurt anyone who doesn't come at me. I told her that. I told you that. I know. Tyrion leaned forward. But if she puts you on a scaffold in front of 10,000 people and takes a sword to you, I'll handle it, Naruto said. That is not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting, Naruto said. It's meant to be accurate. He stood up and walked to the window. The city was doing its regular afternoon business. Below in the yard, the same two guards were changing shift, the same rhythm of the place continuing regardless of what was planned behind its doors. Tyrion. Why are you here? Really? You could have not told me. You could have stayed out of it. Tyrion was quiet for a moment. Because I have spent my entire life watching powerful people make catastrophic decisions based on fear and pride, he said, and I have a, perhaps unhealthy, compulsion to try to mitigate the damage. He paused. And because I think you are not what she thinks you are. And killing things you don't understand it tends to have consequences. You have no idea how right you are about that, Naruto said softly. Tell him, Kurama said. Not yet. Why not? Because knowing what I am isn't going to help him stop her. And if she finds out before the execution, she'll try something worse. Something that might actually hurt civilians. He looked at the city. I'd rather it happen on the scaffold where there's space. Kurama was silent for a moment. You've already planned this out, he said. I've thought about it, Naruto said. It's not a plan so much as a preference. I'd rather not level the building if I don't have to. And if you have to? Naruto's jaw set. Then we do what we have to. But I'm going to try to make sure the people who don't deserve what's coming aren't the ones who get it. The innocent bystanders. Yeah. Kurama made a sound, low, almost imperceptible, the sound of something very large and very old adjusting itself. I know, he said. I know that about you. I was just checking it was still true. It's always true. I know, the fox said again, and his voice was different then, quieter, less dry, something that in a human would have been called fond, though Kurama would have categorized it differently if pressed. I know. Naruto turned from the window. Tyrion was watching him with the expression of a man witnessing a conversation he couldn't hear and was fairly certain he didn't want to fully understand. Get some sleep tonight, Naruto told him. And tomorrow, stay back from the scaffold. Tyrion stared. Why? Naruto smiled, and there was something in it now, something that hadn't been there before, something older than his 19 years, something that lived in the same space as the mark on his palm and the wind that moved around him when his chakra surged. Something that was partly him and partly not him and was, in the end, both of them together. Because things are going to get interesting, he said, and I'd rather you were somewhere you could see it clearly. Tyrion Lannister left the tower with the specific, cold, focused feeling of a man who had tried to stop an avalanche and was now calculating the best place to watch it from. Behind him, in the tower room, Naruto sat back down on the floor and closed his eyes, and reached inward, not to the natural energy of the world outside, but to the vast, contained fire that had lived in him since the day he was born. The fire that had a voice and a name and 9 tails that could each level a mountain. "Hey," he said. "What? You ready?" The answer was not words. It was warmth, enormous, ancient, specific, pressing back against him from inside, the way that only happened when two things that had once been separated by every possible wall had found, through everything, a genuine unity. It was the most honest yes he'd ever received. He opened his eyes and looked at the moonlit city below. "Okay," he said. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." Chapter 3, The Trial of the Demon Fox. The city knew before the sun was fully up. That was the thing about King's Landing, it had a nervous system made of whispers, running from the Red Keep down through the merchant quarters and into the Flea Bottom warrens at its base, and whatever the crown wanted known was known by dawn. Whatever the crown wanted feared was feared by breakfast. Cersei understood this better than anyone. She had spent years learning to play the city's nervous system like an instrument. The announcement had gone out the night before, criers in the major squares, gold cloaks repeating it at the gates. A public proceeding. A foreign entity of unknown and potentially dangerous nature, brought before the people of King's Landing to be judged. The Dothraki had been handled publicly. The Witch of Dragonstone. Every threat to Lannister authority that could be made into theater was made into theater, because theater was governance, and governance was power, and power was the only language Cersei had ever fully trusted. The scaffold was erected in the plaza before the great September. Naruto saw it from his window at first light, the wooden platform going up, the beams and the block, the gold-cloaked guards arranging themselves in the pattern of official ceremony. He watched the workers hammering it together with the specific, experienced calm of someone who had once been told at age 7 that the entire village would have been better off if he'd never been born, and had found, over the years, that the world's willingness to turn its worst face toward him had eventually become less of a wound and more of a very familiar kind of weather. He ate his breakfast. He did it slowly, appreciating it, bread that was better than anything he'd had during the war, soft cheese, actual fruit. He wasn't going to die today, so there was no reason to treat the meal as a last one. But there was also something in him that recognized the particular weight of mornings before things changed, and wanted to be present in it. "You're being philosophical," Kurama said. "I'm eating breakfast." "You're being philosophical while eating breakfast. It's a specific mood. I spent 3 days in a tower reading Westerosi history." He bit into an apple. "I'm allowed a mood." They came for him at midday. Not Alton, a full squad of gold cloaks, 6 of them, armored and formal, led by a captain with the rigid posture of a man who'd been given important instructions and was determined to execute them exactly. Behind them, 2 of the white-cloaked King's Guard. And behind them, at a distance that was technically supervising and practically uncomfortable, Jaime Lannister. Naruto walked out of the room without being asked. He fell into the middle of the escort and moved with them through the corridors of the Red Keep with the relaxed, unhurried pace of someone going somewhere they'd chosen rather than somewhere they were being taken. The gold cloaks kept glancing at him sideways, checking, rechecking, trying to understand why the prisoner didn't feel like a prisoner. Jaime fell into step near him, not quite beside him, close enough to talk without being overheard. "You could fight your way out," Jaime said quietly. "I know. Before we reach the plaza. In here, the corridors are narrow, it would be harder to coordinate against you." Naruto looked at him. "Are you helping me escape?" Jaime's jaw tightened. "I'm pointing out that you have options." "I know I have options," Naruto said. "I don't need to use them yet." "Yet," Jaime said. "Yet," Naruto confirmed. They passed through the main gates of the Red Keep and down the long approach to the city below. The crowd was already there, thick, pressed together in the way that crowds gathered around the promise of something dramatic, and Naruto watched them as he descended toward them, reading the texture of it. Some were curious. Some were afraid, not of him specifically, but of the ceremony, of the gold cloaks, of what happened to people who ended up on scaffolds. Some were hostile, the anger of people whose city had been told to be angry, the kind of mood a crowd got when it had been primed. But here and there, threading through the packed bodies, just watching. Faces without the performed emotion. Myra's face, near the back, was one of them. She saw him and her expression did something complicated. He gave her the faintest nod as he passed. The scaffold was higher up close. Of course it was, spectacle needed scale. The block was center stage, polished and terrible in the midday sun. The executioner stood to one side, a large man in a hood that was traditional rather than practical given that everyone would know who he was before the day was out. Naruto stepped up onto the platform without being pushed. He stood in the center of it and looked out at the crowd and felt, not fear, not the hot urgent thing that fear was, but something sharpening in him, the full presence focus that came when things mattered. He had stood in places that mattered before. He had stood over the bodies of people he loved and promised them things. He had stood in front of the Sage of Six Paths and accepted the burden of the world. He had stood across from a man who wanted to end everything and said no. A scaffold in King's Landing was not the hardest thing he had ever stood on. The herald stepped forward. He unrolled a scroll with the practiced dramatics of official proclamation and began to read, his voice carrying over the plaza in the trained projection of a man who did this for a living. By order of her grace, Cersei of the House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Undulls and the First Men, Protector of the Realm, the creature known as Naruto Uzumaki is brought before the people of King's Landing to answer for, creature, Naruto said, not loudly but clearly. The herald stopped. You said creature, Naruto said. He looked at the herald with the same mild curiosity he might have given to an interesting rock formation. Is that the official language? Not person, not man, not even prisoner. The herald looked at the king's guard flanking the platform. One of them made a gesture that said continue. The herald cleared his throat and continued. To answer for the practice of unnatural arts, the use of unknown and threatening sorcery within the bounds of King's Landing, and the credible suspicion of being a foreign agent of hostile intent, I want to hear the witnesses, Naruto said. Another stop. The herald looked at him properly this time, with the expression of a man who had run many of these proceedings and had never had the subject interrupt. The witnesses will be called in order, now, Naruto said pleasantly. Let's hear them now. I didn't get a chance to read the charges in advance, which is a problem, actually, in any legal system worth having, so let's just do this in order. Who's testifying against me? From the dais beside the scaffold, where Cersei sat under a canopy with the formality of judgment, there was a stillness. The kind that preceded a correction. Naruto looked at her, she was watching him, perfectly composed, her green eyes giving nothing, and he looked back at the crowd and waited. The first witness was a merchant who claimed to have seen Naruto performing threats against the dock workers on the morning of his arrival. He said it with the specific, over-rehearsed smoothness of a man who had been paid to believe what he was saying. He said Naruto had used his unnatural powers to intimidate, to threaten, that he had felt his mind being controlled. You were there? Naruto interrupted. The merchant blinked. I was, at the dock. That morning. Were you on the dock, or near it? Near it, yes, which dock? What were you selling? The merchant's rehearsal was not built for follow-up questions. His eyes skittered to the side, toward the king's guard, toward the dais, for guidance that wasn't forthcoming. The crowd shifted. Not dramatically, just the small, collective physical adjustment of people recalibrating. The south dock, he said, with less confidence. I came in at the north dock, Naruto said. The fisherman who was there is named Pell. He could tell you I didn't threaten anyone. In fact I said hello and swam to the ladder. He looked at the crowd. Is Pell here? From somewhere in the middle of the crowd, A rough voice, slightly hoarse. A hand went up. The boy's right. He swam in. Didn't threaten nobody. Just looked confused. A pause. I thought he was a madman. A ripple of something, not laughter, but its cousin, moved through the crowd. The merchant was escorted off the platform with significantly less dignity than he'd arrived with. The second witness was a Red Keep guard who claimed that Naruto had broken out of his room on the second night, the obvious implication being hostile intent, planning, threat. He described it in careful detail, a story that had been assembled with more sophistication than the first. Naruto let him finish. On the second night, Naruto said, I was in my room the entire time. You can check with the guard Alton, he was posted outside my door. He'd tell you I was there. He paused. Actually, I'd like him to be called. From the King's Guard, Ser Marin Trant, because someone had to manage the proceeding and Jamie had very deliberately positioned himself at the edge of the platform, made a motion to move forward. Alton is unavailable, Marin said. Naruto looked at him. Unavailable how? The silence that followed was a different kind of silence, not the crowd's uncertainty, but the tighter, colder silence of something that had been said and couldn't be unsaid, and everyone in the plaza with functioning instincts registered it. They've moved him, Kurama said. Yeah. Sent him somewhere he can't be called. Naruto kept his face neutral but something inside him went cold and clear, the specific temperature of anger that had been through enough to know exactly what to do with itself. Convenient. Alton is a member of the Gold Cloak, Naruto said to the crowd, and his voice was still calm, still conversational, nothing heated in it. He was posted outside my door every night. He would tell you I was there. I'm asking where he is and I'm being told he's unavailable. He let that sit for a moment. Make of that what you will. The crowd made of it exactly what he'd intended. The third witness was a woman, a highborn lady whose name Naruto didn't know, dressed in the Lannister colors, who claimed she had felt her will overcome by the stranger's presence, that she had experienced visions, that she had woken screaming in the night. This one was better, more emotional, less checkable. Naruto watched her speak and felt the crowd's sympathy moving toward her, the particular pull of a frightened woman telling a frightened story in a frightened city. He let her finish. My lady, he said. When did you meet me? She hesitated. In the corridor, the second day, we passed each other in a corridor, Naruto said. He nodded slowly. And the visions came that night. Yes, you've been having trouble sleeping for some time, haven't you, he said, very gently. Before I arrived. She blinked. I don't, there are people in this city who struggle to sleep, Naruto said to the crowd, not to her, not accusing her, just widening the frame. There are people who have frightening dreams. That was true before I arrived and will be true after I leave. I'm sorry for whatever you're experiencing. He meant it. He looked at the woman and he meant it, and she saw that he meant it, and something in her face buckled very slightly. But it isn't connected to me. She was escorted down. The crowd was different now from how it had been 20 minutes ago. Not transformed, crowds didn't transform, they shifted, like weather, but the texture had changed. The primed hostility had developed hairline fractures. There was murmuring now, the particular sound of people rechecking what they'd been handed. Cersei, on the dais, was perfectly still. Qyburn was beside her. He watched the platform with the detached attention of a scientist watching an experiment produce unexpected data. Tyrion was nowhere visible, which meant he was somewhere visible from the back and staying deliberately unassociated. Jaime was at the edge of the platform, and his face, usually the expression of someone who had trained themselves not to have expressions in public, had the faintest ghost of something on it. Not surprise. Something more like recognition. The herald stepped forward again. His voice had lost some of its ceremony. The Queen's justice determines that the evidence presented is sufficient to, I want to speak, Naruto said. A pause. The accused has no right to, in any legal system worth having, Naruto said, and he said it clearly, to the crowd as much as to the herald, the accused has the right to speak. He looked at Cersei directly. You can have me stopped. Or you can let me talk. The crowd waited. Every person in the plaza was holding their breath, the collective inhale of people watching a very delicate thing balance. Cersei said nothing. Which was, Naruto recognized, her version of permission. He turned to face the crowd fully. He didn't perform it. He didn't do the thing that people sometimes did in these moments, the chest out, voice raised, arm extended oratory of someone who had learned how to work a crowd. He just talked. The way he always talked. Like he was speaking to one person, even when speaking to 10,000. I came here 5 days ago through something I couldn't control. I landed in your harbor. The guards who picked me up treated me fine, I wasn't threatened, I wasn't roughed up, I was brought here and given food and shelter. He paused. I'm not from this world. I know that's hard to believe. I know it sounds insane. But the thing about truth is that it doesn't get less true just because it's hard to believe. The crowd was very still. I have abilities that are unusual here. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I can walk on walls. I can do things with energy that most of you have never seen. Where I'm from, these things are taught, they're not magic, they're technique, they're training. There's nothing supernatural about me. I'm just a person from a place you don't know yet. He paused. Let it breathe. I was brought here, I was examined, and I was honest throughout. Every answer I gave was true. And now I'm standing on a scaffold because someone in power doesn't know what to do with something they don't understand. He let his gaze move across the crowd. That's happened to me before. Not here, back home. When I was a kid, my village didn't know what to do with me either. They were afraid of something I carried. So they made me into a monster in their heads, before they knew anything about me. He looked at the dais. At Cersei. That's what's happening today. Not justice. Fear wearing justice's clothes. The silence after that was not the silence of a crowd that had been quieted. It was the silence of a crowd that was thinking. From somewhere in the front rows, a man, middle-aged, the calloused hands of someone who worked for a living, he's right. Not loud. Not a rallying cry. Just said. The way you said things that were true. Several people near him didn't disagree. Cersei stood. Not sharply, with the measured, deliberate rise of someone who had decided that the timing was now, regardless of how the air had shifted. She looked at the platform. She looked at the crowd. And she made the calculation that she had been moving toward for days, the calculation of a woman who had decided that the most dangerous thing was not the unknown creature from another world, but the moment when the crowd stopped being afraid. The evidence has been heard, she said, and her voice was the voice she had, the one that carried rooms. The judgment is clear. The creature known as Naruto Uzumaki, whose origin cannot be verified, whose abilities pose an undetermined threat to the safety of this city and its people, is hereby sentenced to execution. By order of the crown. The crowd erupted, but not uniformly, not the clean roar of condemnation. It was divided. Loud in places, silent in others. People shouting different things. The civic body of King's Landing, fractured down the center by a conversation on a scaffold. Naruto turned from the crowd and looked at the executioner. The man had stepped forward, axe in hand, moving toward the block with the solemn momentum of professional duty. Well, Kurama said. His voice was very calm. Not alarmed. Just, ready. Yeah, Naruto said. You're not going to put your neck on that block. Obviously not. So how do you want to do this? Naruto looked at the axe. At the block. At the gold cloaks closing in on 3 sides. At Ser Marin-Trant moving toward him with the expression of a man executing an order. At Cersei on the dais. At Jaime at the platform's edge, standing absolutely still with both hands now resting at his sides, not on his sword but close, the posture of a man who hadn't decided yet. At the crowd. At the faces in the crowd, Mira, somewhere in the back. Hell, whom he'd never met but who defended him anyway because the truth was the truth. The man in the front row who'd said he was right. Enough people have been hurt today, Naruto said. We do this clean. No one in the crowd. No one who doesn't deserve it. Agreed, Kurama said, and his voice had the weight of a promise. I'll follow your lead. Ser Marentrant's hand closed on Naruto's shoulder and pushed, not the worst shove, not brutal, just the practiced redirection of a guard managing a prisoner. It was meant to move Naruto toward the block. It was the first time anyone in King's Landing had laid hands on him. The moment of contact was also, instantly, the moment Maren realized that pushing Naruto Uzumaki was approximately as effective as pushing a statue bolted to the ground. Naruto didn't move. His shoulder didn't give. Nothing moved except Maren's hand, which encountered the particular solid reality of a person whose chakra had been running through their body since before they could walk. Maren pushed harder. Naruto turned his head and looked at him. Maren stopped pushing. That's what I thought, Naruto said quietly. He turned back to the crowd. The crowd had gone quiet again, the sharp, held breath quiet of people watching something happen that they hadn't been prepared for. He looked out at them for a moment, all those faces, all that ordinary human fear and ordinary human anger and ordinary human watchfulness. I'm not going to die today, he said, to the crowd and to Cersei and to King's Landing. I'm not going to run either. I'm going to stand here and you're all going to see something. He looked at his hands. Something I didn't want to have to show you. But she's made the choice, so here we are. The gold cloaks rushed him. All six at once, good coordination, well trained, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who handle dangerous people regularly. They came from three directions with the intention of overwhelming a single target through sheer combined force and weight of bodies. Naruto moved. Not fast, by his standards. He could have been across the plaza before they'd taken 2 steps. But he moved at the speed of something that wanted to be seen, wanted the crowd to see it clearly, wanted there to be no confusion about what was happening, and what they saw was this: 6 men in golden armor reaching for one person, and one person not being there when they arrived. He went up. Straight up, a single motion from standing to 6 feet above the scaffold, no jump, no crouch, just a vertical repositioning that had nothing to do with gravity's opinion on the matter. He landed on the top of one of the scaffold supporting beams with the lightness of a bird, 1 foot balanced perfectly on 8 inches of wood, 30 feet above the cobblestones, and looked down at the 6 guards sprawled on the platform below, having collided with each other in the space where he'd been. The crowd made a sound. It was not the sound crowds made during executions. It was the sound crowds made during something else entirely. Naruto crouched on the beam, balanced, comfortable. He looked at Cersei. She was standing, and for the first time in the days since he'd met her, something real was moving in her face, not quite fear, because she was Cersei Lannister and fear didn't get to show up cleanly, but the outer expression of it, the white-knuckled grip on the armrest of her chair, the slight parting of her lips. I told you, he said. Not unkindly. I told you from the beginning. She looked at Ser Gregor Clegane. The mountain moved. He came off the steps of the dais and crossed the plaza with the particular quality of motion that very large, heavily armored things had, the ground-shaking deliberateness of something that didn't need to hurry because nothing in its experience had ever outrun it. He reached the scaffold in seconds and the wood groaned under his weight as he stepped onto it, and he looked up at Naruto on the beam with the blank, dead-eyed focus of a creature that had been pointed at something and was in the process of acquiring it. Naruto looked down at him. He felt the wrongness again, stronger now, close up. Whatever had been done to Clegane was deep and dark and not quite natural, a particular kind of chakra-adjacent corruption that resonated against his senses like a discordant note. Ha, Naruto said. He's been modified, Kurama said. Something was done to him. He's not fully organic. I can see that. He watched the mountain reach for the beam. An 8-foot hand wrapped around the structural wood and the beam moved, not broke, but flexed, the mountain strength applied to it with the casual certainty of a man who had never encountered a thing he couldn't pull apart. Can he be hurt? By you? Yes. By normal weapons? Probably not. Okay. The mountain yanked the beam. Naruto stepped off it in the half-second before it gave, fell the 30 feet to the plaza floor, and landed in the space between the scaffold and the crowd in a crouch that absorbed the impact with the ease of someone who had landed from higher. He came up standing, hands loose at his sides, and looked at the mountain coming off the collapsing edge of the scaffold toward him. The crowd surged back. The gold cloaks were shouting, not at Naruto, at the crowd, pushing people back, the instinctive containment response of men who'd just seen the scaffold fall. The mountain reached for Naruto. Naruto caught his wrist. One hand. Right hand. Fingers closing around the massive armored forearm, and the mountain, who had stopped every man he'd ever fought against through simple, overwhelming physical force, found himself stopped. Not thrown, not fought, just stopped, 140 pounds of 19-year-old applying a force that had no relation to his apparent size and finding that it was sufficient. The mountain pushed. Naruto didn't move. The mountain pushed harder. The cobblestones under Naruto's feet cracked, not from the force of the mountain, but from Naruto's chakra grounding automatically, roots going down through stone the way they went down through water, through walls, through anything. He looked up at the mountain's face. The dead eyes. The absence that lived where a person had been. "I'm sorry for what was done to you," Naruto said, meaning it. He redirected. Not a throw, a guided release, chakra through his palm into the mountain's arm, a directional push that used the mountain's own momentum and added something to it. The mountain went sideways, not falling, because things that size didn't fall easily, but moving, covering 20 feet of plaza and a sideways stumble that ended with him against the wall of the September with a sound like a siege engine hitting stone. The wall didn't break. The mountain stood back up. But the plaza was very quiet. Naruto turned back to the dais. Cersei was standing, both hands at her sides, and behind her composure, through the cracks that the last 60 seconds had put in it, something was moving that he recognized, that he had seen before on other faces in other places. She had just understood that she had made a mistake. Not regret, not yet. Understanding. The recalibration of someone whose model of the situation had just been broken open and needed to be rebuilt on different foundations. Qyburn, beside her, was looking at Naruto with an expression of pure, focused fascination. Not fear. Not alarm. Fascination. Tyrion had appeared from somewhere in the crowd, he was near the back, and when Naruto found his face, Tyrion gave him a look that was layered with about 14 things, chief among them the expression of a man who had expected this and had hoped very hard to be wrong. Jaime was on the edge of the demolished scaffold. He hadn't drawn his sword. He was watching Naruto with those eyes that asked a question, and Naruto thought the question had gotten closer to being formulated. "I'm not your enemy," Naruto said to Cersei. "To the dais, to the plaza, to King's Landing entire. I've told you that since day one. I can walk out of this city right now and you'll never see me again, or I can stay and maybe be useful to you. Those are the options." He looked at her. "But I need you to understand something before you choose." The mountain was approaching again from behind him. He didn't look. "What I showed you today is a small piece of what I can do. An extremely small piece." He held her gaze. "The thing I carry, the thing Qyburn's instruments couldn't measure, is something that makes the mountain look like a garden ornament. I'm not telling you that to threaten you. I'm telling you because you need accurate information to make a good decision, and you have been making decisions based on wrong information since the moment I arrived." He waited. The mountain reached him and Naruto, without looking, put a hand back and redirected again, the same guided push, less gentle this time, enough that the mountain covered 30 feet instead of 20 and sat down with an impact that cracked the cobblestones. The crowd made another sound. "Well?" Naruto asked. Cersei looked at him across the ruins of her scaffold, in front of her people, with her greatest weapon sitting in a crater of its own making 30 feet behind the stranger she tried to execute. And Cersei Lannister, who did not make decisions from fear, who attacked what frightened her, who had never in her life surrendered a single inch of ground without extracting a price for it, made the worst decision of her life. "Take him," she said. "All of you. Now." Every gold cloak in the plaza moved. Naruto exhaled slowly. "Kurama," he said. "Ready," the fox said. And his voice was different now, not dry, not wry, not the sardonic commentary of a creature managing its own boredom. His voice was the voice of something waking up. Something that had been patient because patience had been asked of it and was now, finally, done being patient. "Don't hurt the crowd," Naruto said. "I know," Kurama said, with the absolute certainty of something that had been saying "I know your values" for 10 years and meant it every time. "I know." The gold cloaks closed in. Naruto let them reach him. Let them try. Let King's Landing see it happen. And then, in the space between one moment and the next, on the plaza before the Great September, with 10,000 people watching and Cersei on her dais and Jaime on the ruins of the scaffold and Tyrion somewhere in the crowd, Naruto Uzumaki stopped managing it. Orange light erupted from him. Not fire, chakra, raw and visible, the Kyuubi's power rising through the partnership they'd built, the Nine-Tails signature burning through his skin in lines like circuit patterns, his eyes shifting from blue to the vertical slit crimson of full chakra mode. The air pressure changed. People felt it in their chests before they understood what it was, the way you felt a thunderclap in your ribs before you processed the sound. The gold cloak stumbled back from the shockwave of pure released chakra, not thrown, not hurt, just displaced, like leaves from a tree that a very large animal had walked through. Naruto stood in the center of it and let it settle around him and looked up at Cersei. He wasn't angry. He was very clear. "Last chance," he said. Cersei's hand was raised. Her order was ready. Her green eyes were alive with the particular combustible mixture of her genius and her terror and her absolute refusal to let either of those things make her bend. She was so close to a different choice. So terribly, fatally close. "Kill him," she said. Chapter 4, The Scaffold. The archers on the September's roof loosed first. 12 of them, Cersei's insurance, positioned before dawn, because Cersei always had insurance. The arrows came down in a clean volley, the kind of coordinated release that a good archery captain could be proud of, 12 shafts tracking toward a single target in the middle of the plaza. They hit the chakra field and stopped. Not deflected. Stopped, mid-air, each one arrested like a finger had reached out and held it, hanging there in the orange glow for one suspended, impossible second before they dropped to the cobblestones in a neat cluster at Naruto's feet. He didn't look at them. He was still looking at Cersei. The crowd saw this. 10,000 people saw 12 arrows stop in the air and fall harmlessly to the ground, and the sound they made was not a scream and not a cheer, it was something older than both, the sound humans made when they witnessed something that reclassified the nature of reality. Cersei's composure held. It was remarkable, actually, Naruto could acknowledge that even now. Most people, watching arrows fail in midair, would have shown something. She showed nothing. She turned to Qyburn. Whatever she said to him was too quiet for the crowd, but Qyburn moved, quick and purposeful, down from the dais and toward the September side entrance, disappearing into the shadow with the focused urgency of a man retrieving something. "She has a contingency," Kurama said. "She always has a contingency." Naruto tracked Qyburn's exit and kept half his attention on the mountain, who had stood back up from the cracked cobblestones and was approaching again with the tireless, mechanical patience of something that didn't experience discouragement. "What's he getting?" "I don't know. But I can smell it from here. Something old. Something that's been treated. Changed. Like the mountain. Different. Worse." The gold cloaks were regrouping. Their captain, the spade-jawed one from the docks, who had apparently been reassigned to this duty, which Naruto thought was either punishment or promotion depending on how you saw it, was directing them into a wider formation, trying to flank instead of center rush. Better tactics. He'd learned from the first attempt. Naruto looked at the formation and made a decision. He crossed the 30 feet between himself and the flanking line in a single flash step, not body flicker, just speed, the kind of controlled acceleration that ate distance without the dramatic visual of the actual technique, and was standing inside their formation before they'd completed it, and he put his palms on the nearest two guards and pushed, and the push was chakra-assisted and directional and very, very precisely calibrated to send people stumbling backward without breaking anything. They went. Not hurt. Just moved. He stepped through the space they'd left and walked away from the formation, and the formation tried to close around him, and he was somewhere else before it did, and the guards kept catching each other in spaces where he'd just been. To the crowd, it looked like he was everywhere at once. He wasn't, he was just very fast and reading the movements 2 steps ahead, the way he'd read enemies in actual combat for years. But the effect was the same. 10,000 people watching a single person move through 30 armed men like water moving through fingers. The mountain came through the formation like it wasn't there, simply walked through his own men, who stumbled out of the way, and tracked Naruto with those dead eyes and closed the distance faster than his size suggested possible. Naruto let him close. When the mountain swung, a full-arm arc, gauntlet fist the size of a cartwheel, the kind of blow that had caved in armor and skulls and once, reputedly, the skull of a horse, Naruto dropped under it, came up inside the swing radius, put both palms flat against the mountain's chest plate and released. The chakra burst was controlled. Directional, again. But bigger than before, not the level of a redirect, but the level of statement, the kind of push that a Rasengan might make if you stripped it of its rotation and applied it as pure horizontal force. The mountain went backward across the plaza, boots leaving trenches in the cobblestones as he tried to arrest his own momentum, and crashed into the scaffolding ruins hard enough to bring the remaining structure down in a cascade of timber and splinter. The crowd surged back from the debris. The mountain stood up from the wreckage. Slowly. Missing his helmet somewhere in the collapse, his enormous pale face blank and expressionless and entirely undiscouraged. He won't stop, Kurama observed. Whatever Qyburn did to him. He literally will not stop. I know. I'm not trying to stop him. I'm trying to demonstrate something. What? That this can keep going as long as she wants it to. Naruto looked at Cersei on the dais. Every time she sends something at me, I can handle it. Without escalating. I want her to see that. I want the crowd to see that. You're hoping she exhausts her options and stands down. I'm hoping she sees sense. A pause. I know. I know she won't. But I want it on record that I tried. Who's keeping the record? Naruto glanced at the crowd. At Tyrion's face somewhere in the back, processing everything with that sharp, contained intelligence. At Mira. At the man who'd said he was right. At Jaime, who was still on the scaffold ruins, and who had still not drawn his sword. They are, Naruto said. Qyburn came back out of the September side entrance carrying something in a covered box, and carrying is generous, he had 2 of his assistants hauling it on a wooden frame between them. Whatever was in the box was wrong in the specific, resonant way that the mountain was wrong, except stronger. Naruto felt it before Qyburn had covered half the distance, a deep, discordant pulse against his chakra sense, like dark chakra filtered through something that shouldn't exist. The box was the size of a large chest. Heavy, from how the assistants moved. Qyburn set it before the dais and looked at Naruto across the plaza with his precise, gray eyes, and something in his expression was apologetic in the way of a scientist who was sorry about a necessary experiment. What's in the box? Naruto said. Qyburn didn't answer. He opened the box. What came out was a creature, once, probably, something natural. A large animal, canine-shaped, but done to it what had been done to the mountain and more, something had been introduced into its system that had rewritten its basic nature, and what was standing in the plaza now was alive and not alive, present and not present, and radiating the cold, wrong energy that made Naruto's skin register it before his mind had classified it. It had no eyes. They'd been replaced with something else, dark crystal-like structures that caught no light, gave no reflection. Its body was oversized, proportioned wrongly, the musculature wrong in the way of something that had been augmented past its natural frame. The crowd screamed. Not the people near the back, they didn't know yet. But the people in the front, who could see it clearly, who were close enough to feel the wrongness of it, they broke. The front third of the crowd started pushing backward into the people behind them, and suddenly the plaza had a crowd problem in addition to everything else, the human press of bodies trying to escape in too many directions at once. Kurama. I see it. His voice was sharp. It's been poisoned. Not physically, it's nature. Something has been done to its spirit. A pause, and in that pause something moved in Naruto, a deep internal shift that he recognized as Kurama paying close attention to something that personally offended him. Something has been done to its soul. Can you fix it? Not from in here. Another pause. Not like this. The creature moved toward Naruto. It moved wrong, not quite walking, the joints bending in ways that suggested the bones had been replaced or rearranged, and the cold wrongness of it intensified as it closed distance. Around it, the cobblestones were darkening, as if the ground itself was registering a contamination. Naruto looked at it and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, but the particular sorrow that came from seeing something alive that had been made into something it was never supposed to be. He'd felt it looking at the tailed beasts during the war. He'd felt it looking at the reanimated dead that Kabuto had turned into weapons. He'd felt it looking at every person whose nature had been twisted by someone else's agenda. Qyburn, he said. The scholar looked at him. What did you do to it? I gave it purpose, Qyburn said, with the genuine, earnest tone of a man who believed what he was saying. I improved it. You destroyed it, Naruto said. Whatever it was, you destroyed it. Something moved in Qyburn's face. Not guilt. Something more complicated, the expression of a man who had considered that argument and had a counterargument ready but couldn't quite deliver it without acknowledging the weight of what he was countering. The creature lunged. Naruto went sideways, not backward, sideways, inside the lunge's arc, and his hand came up and he put 2 fingers to the creature's skull and released a precise, pinpoint chakra pulse. Not an attack. More like a knock on a door. The kind of thing that, in the world he knew, was the opening move in a communication rather than a combat. The creature stopped. Not fell. Stopped, mid-motion, and held that position, and something happened in the space around it that was difficult to describe, the wrongness flickered, like a signal being interrupted. From inside Naruto, Kurama pushed. Not physically. Something he did with chakra that was different from the things he did with chakra in fights, deeper, more specific, the technique of a creature who had spent 9,000 years understanding what chakra actually was at its base level and could reach into the energy of other beings the way a doctor reached into a wound. There's something still alive in there, Kurama said. Under what was done to it. Something original. Can we reach it? I'm trying. A long, stretched moment. The creature was still. Around it, the darkened cobblestones were lightening slightly, incrementally, a slow reversal. Yes. I have it. His voice changed, and it was a particular change that happened when Kurama was dealing with something that resonated with his own history, the history of a being whose nature had been treated as a resource rather than a life. It's terrified. Has been since before it was changed. Fear was what made it, tractable. Can you, give me a moment? The plaza was very quiet. The crowd had stopped pushing, the human press had halted in the face of something stranger and more compelling than the danger itself. People were watching a young man stand with 2 fingers on the skull of a creature that had no eyes and a broken nature, and the creature was not moving, and the light around the young man was bright and warm and not at all what the morning had started as. Cersei, on the dais, said something to the king's guard. Ser Marin moved. Don't, Jaime said. He'd moved from the scaffold ruins. He was standing between the dais and the plaza, between Cersei's order and the thing happening in the square, and his hand was on his sword hilt but in the posture of a man preventing something rather than doing something. Marin stopped. Looked at Jaime. Looked back at the dais. Cersei looked at Jaime. The look between them was a whole conversation, years of it, compressed into 2 seconds. He looked back at her with the same eyes he'd used when Naruto had asked about oaths, the same complicated thing that lived there. Look at the crowd, Jaime said quietly. Cersei. Look at the crowd. She didn't. She was looking at him. They're not afraid of him, Jaime said. They were, 20 minutes ago. They're not anymore. He paused. Whatever you do next, you're not going to be able to explain it as justice. From the plaza, a sound, not dramatic, not the crowd roar of a moment of triumph. Quieter than that. A sound like something exhaling. The creature that Qyburn had made sat down on the cobblestones. Not collapsed, sat, with the deliberate, almost gentle motion of something that had been very tired for a very long time and had finally been told it was allowed to rest. The wrongness that had radiated from it was dimmer now, not gone but reduced, like a volume being turned down. Its dark crystal eyes went cloudy, then lightened. Naruto pulled his hand back. He looked at the creature for a moment with an expression that was entirely specific to him, the expression he had when he'd done something that mattered and didn't need anyone to acknowledge it. Did you, partially, Kurama said. What was done to it is deep. I've quieted the worst of it. The rest would take time we don't have right now. A pause. But it's not in pain anymore. That's enough for now, Naruto said. Thank you. Don't thank me. She's about to do something else. Naruto looked up at the dais. Cersei was speaking to Qyburn again, and this time Qyburn's expression was different, reluctant, which was the first reluctance Naruto had seen on his face. He was shaking his head slightly. She said something more. He looked at the plaza, at Naruto, at the quieted creature, and he said something that made her face go very still. Then he walked away from the dais. Not toward Naruto. He walked to the side of the plaza, to the edge of the crowd, and stopped there. He looked at Naruto across the distance and gave him a single, brief nod. What was that? Kurama asked. He refused to do whatever she asked next, Naruto said. And he wanted me to know. Interesting. He's drawing a line. Whatever she asked him to do next was past his line. A man of principle working for a woman of none. It happens. The gold cloaks had regrouped again, full formation now, 20 men, the ones who'd been managing the crowd pulled in to reinforce the ones who'd been trying to contain Naruto. Their captain had the expression of a man who had completely run out of tactical ideas and was proceeding on professional obligation alone. And the mountain was up again. Still coming. Tireless, blank-faced, tracking. Naruto looked at the mountain and made a decision about escalation. He formed the hand signs without rushing, the familiar sequence, muscle memory built over years, the signs that opened the door to Sage Chakra. His eyes shifted, the blue going gold-ringed, the horizontal pupils of Toad Sage mode, the natural energy of this foreign world flowing into him in the shape he'd calibrated over the last 4 days. The world got louder. That was always the first thing, everything got louder, the air pressure and the heat signatures and the sound and the energy signatures of every living thing in range, all of it sharper and more present. He could feel the crowd's collective heartbeat. He could feel Cersei's, elevated, controlled, the heartbeat of a woman managing a physiological response. He could feel Jaime's, slower than anyone else in the vicinity, the heartbeat of someone who had survived enough violence to be calm inside it. He could feel Kurama, vast and warm and completely present, and he felt the fox register his entry into Sage mode and press forward slightly, the way a partner leaned in when things got serious. Show them, Kurama said. Full mode. Let them see what they've been trying to execute. That was my plan. I know. I just like saying it. Naruto let the full Kurama Sage mode settle over him. The orange chakra blazed up, not the controlled pulse from before but the full, open expression of it, the code of living energy, the 9 tendrils behind him faintly suggested in the surge of chakra, the air around him heating to the temperature of something large and ancient burning from the inside out. His eyes were gold-ringed and red-irised simultaneously, the layering of his 2 modes, the full expression of what Naruto Uzumaki was when he stopped managing it. The mountain stopped. It was the first time the mountain had stopped of his own accord. Whatever lived in him that processed threat had apparently registered a threshold. The gold-cloaked captain stopped his men. The crowd made that sound again, but bigger now. The full 10,000 of them, the whole city pressed into this plaza, and the sound they made was not human fear and not human awe but some combination of both that didn't have a clean word for it. Naruto walked toward the dais. Not fast. Not threatening. Just walking, across the plaza, through the space that opened in front of him because there was nobody left who felt like standing in it. The gold cloaks moved out of his path. The mountain stood still, not following. The creature sat on the cobblestones and watched him with its lightened eyes. He reached the base of the dais steps and stopped. Cersei looked down at him. 10 steps between them. She was standing, both hands at her sides, and in the full light of the sage mode chakra she looked exactly like what she was, brilliant and terrified and absolutely unwilling to be either of those things in public. Her Kingsguard had stepped closer, bracketing her, the instinctive protective formation. Jaime was beside the steps. He looked at Naruto with those eyes that had been asking a question for days, and Naruto thought that the question, finally, had resolved into something. "You should stop this," Naruto said to Cersei. Quietly. Not a threat, a recommendation. Not because you can't make it worse. You can. But because this city is watching and you have already lost the narrative and everything you do from here digs the hole deeper. He paused. Let it end here. I'll leave the city. You can tell your people whatever you want about how it ended. I don't care. Cersei looked at him. The gold chakra light played on her face and her hair and the stone steps between them. Below them, King's Landing held its breath. You came to my city, she said. And her voice was steady, devastatingly steady, the voice of a woman who had decided something and had no more calculation left to do. You stood on my scaffold and spoke to my people. You redirected my Kingsguard and threw my champion through half the plaza. Something in her voice, beneath the control. You think I can let that stand? In front of them. She indicated the crowd with the smallest motion of her eyes. You think any of this can stand? It doesn't have to stand for you, Naruto said. It just has to be over. It will be over, she said. When you're dead. She reached down beside her chair and lifted a torch. It had been sitting there since before the proceedings, unlit, a precaution, the kind of contingency that Cersei always had, and Naruto understood in the same instant what it meant, because he'd read the history, because Tyrion had told him about the Mad King and Jaime had told him about oaths, because of all the things that had been done in this city with fire and tragedy and the specific madness of people who would rather burn everything than surrender it. There was wildfire beneath the plaza. Not much, not enough to take the whole city, nothing like the caches that had been used in the Battle of the Blackwater. But enough. Qyburn's contingency within the contingency, laid before dawn, the underground stores that the gold cloaks who'd said it didn't fully understand. Enough to take the plaza. The September steps. The dais. The front rows of the crowd. Naruto, Kurama said, and his voice was not sharp now, it was, something else. Something that happened when Kurama registered a threat to people who couldn't protect themselves. Something that Naruto had only heard a few times and always in the worst moments. The crowd. I know. He had approximately 2 seconds. He thought about using the flash step to get to Cersei and take the torch, but she was on the dais with 4 Kingsguard between them and the torch was already moving toward a channel and the math of it didn't work, the angles didn't work, 2 seconds was not enough to cover the steps and reach her and stop her hand. He thought about a barrier, a chakra wall, dense enough to redirect the blast upward. But a wildfire explosion beneath paving stones didn't go upward cleanly. It went every direction. A barrier on the surface did nothing for what came up through the ground. 1 second. He thought about containment, pulling the explosion inward, using his chakra to crush the ignition before it could propagate. He'd done things like it before. With Kurama. When they were together. Can we? He said. Down through the ground, Kurama said, and the word we was doing everything in that sentence. You go down, I'll hold it. Half a second. The torch touched the channel. Naruto drove his chakra into the ground. The ignition happened, the wildfire's distinctive blue-green flash, the beginning of the chemistry that nobody in this world fully understood and that burned through water and flesh and stone with equal enthusiasm. It happened underground, in the channels and caches below the plaza's paving stones, and it was the beginning of something that should have become catastrophic and unstoppable. It did not become those things. Because in the space between the ground and the plaza surface, in the substrate of earth and old stone and the deep veins of the world, something was there that the wildfire had not been planning on. Something vast and warm and specifically designed by 9,000 years of existence to contain destructive chakra-adjacent energy, pressed down through the soles of a 19-year-old's feet and into the bones of the earth itself. The ground shook. Once, a single, deep, subsurface convulsion, the sound of enormous energy being met and held and redirected. The paving stones cracked in a ring pattern around Naruto, radiating outward from where he stood. Several cracked and lifted and fell back. The wildfire went nowhere. Naruto exhaled. He was on one knee, the effort of containment had been real, had cost something, and he let himself acknowledge that without hiding it. He breathed. The chakra settled. Around him, the cracked stone steamed faintly where the redirected energy had bled out harmlessly into the deep earth. He looked up at Cersei. She was still holding the dead torch. The channel had taken the flame and the flame had gone into the ground and stopped, and the crowd was still alive, and the September was still standing, and King's Landing was not on fire. Cersei looked at the torch. At the intact plaza. At Naruto on one knee in the center of it. And then she looked at Jaime. He was looking at her, and his face had the expression he'd had when he described oaths to Naruto, the complicated, deeply buried thing that had lived there his whole adult life, and now it was not buried anymore. It was on the surface. Clear as the noon sun. Cersei, he said. She looked at him for a long time. The torch was still in her hand. The plaza was very still. 10,000 people not breathing. Cersei, he said again, and the way he said it was not a command, was not a plea, it was something more specific than either, the voice of someone who had been standing at a particular crossroads for years and had chosen, and the choice was made now and was going to be lived with however it was lived with. Stop. Her face broke. Not collapsed, broke is the right word. The way ice breaks on a river when spring comes, not dramatically but specifically, a crack that ran from one edge to the other, and underneath it the water moving that had always been moving but had been covered. Her grip on the torch loosened. It dropped from her hand and clattered on the dais steps and rolled and was still. She sat down. Not strategically, she sat the way people sat when their legs stopped working and they needed something solid beneath them. Qyburn, from the side of the plaza, made a small, quiet sound that was mostly breath. Naruto stood up from his knee. He stood and he breathed and he looked at the cracked stone around him and at the crowd and at Cersei, sitting on the steps of her dais in the city she had held by fear for so long, and he felt, not triumph. Not relief, entirely. Something more complex. The particular feeling of a moment that had been terrible and was now over, and the weight of the terrible part didn't disappear just because the over part had arrived. The crowd began to make noise again. Not the sound from before, not fear, not the wild awe of impossible things. Something that sounded more human. More specific. The sound of people who had been holding their breath in a burning building and had just understood that the fire was out. Tyrion appeared at the edge of the plaza, making his way through the crowd with purpose. His face was white and controlled and working very hard on an expression of composure that had clearly been under significant strain. He reached the edge of the cracked stone and stopped. He looked at Naruto. He looked at the cracked plaza. He looked at his sister on the dais steps and his brother by the dais base and the mountain standing still in the middle distance and the creature on the cobblestones that was no longer radiating wrongness. He looked up at Naruto. "I told you," he said, his voice slightly unsteady, "to stay back from the scaffold." "I was on the scaffold," Naruto said. "I know," Tyrion said. "I was speaking aspirationally." Something that might have been a laugh, in different circumstances, moved through Naruto's chest. He let the sage mode settle, let the gold ring and the chakra coat pull back, let himself be just himself again, 19 years old and exhausted and standing in a cracked plaza in a world that wasn't his. "Good," Kurama said. "Just that. Just the one word, and it was warm, and it was Kurama." Above King's Landing, the sun had moved to its afternoon position. The city was very quiet. The gold cloaks were standing in their formation and not moving. The archers on the September roof had put down their bows. Cersei Lannister sat on the steps of her dais and did not look at anyone. And Naruto Uzumaki stood in the middle of the cracked plaza and looked at the city around him and thought, clearly and simply, nobody died today. That was something. That was, depending on how you counted, everything. "What now?" Kurama asked. Naruto looked at the sky. At the city. At the crowd still packed in the plaza, watching him, the city watching him, all of it watching. "Now," he said, "things get complicated." Chapter 5, Red and Gold. The aftermath of almost catastrophe had a particular texture. Naruto had felt it before, after the war, after the big battles, in the hours when the fighting was done and the adrenaline was metabolizing and the world had to figure out what shape it was in now. There was always this interval. Not peace, not quite. The held breath between the last thing and the next thing, when everyone was still standing in the places the storm had left them and nobody had started moving yet. King's Landing was in that interval now. The plaza was slowly emptying, not fleeing, just the organic dispersal of a crowd that had witnessed something and needed to go somewhere quiet to process it. People moved in the particular dazed way of the recently shocked, in small clusters, talking quietly or not at all. Some of them looked back at Naruto as they went. Not with hostility. With something harder to name, the look people gave things that had rearranged their understanding of what was possible. The gold cloaks had received no orders. Without orders, they stood in their formation and did nothing, which was the safest available option and they all seemed to know it. The mountain stood where Naruto had last redirected him, 30 feet from the dais, in the middle of the emptying plaza, and had not moved since Cersei had sat down. He was doing the thing that people who had been given a purpose and then had that purpose suspended did, he was waiting. Naruto watched him for a moment and felt the resonance of Qyburn's work still present in him, the cold underlying wrongness, but quieter now, not active. Jaime was with his sister. He'd gone to the dais steps while Naruto was standing in the cracked stone, not saying anything to anyone, just going because that was where he needed to be. He sat beside her on the steps and they were having a conversation that Naruto could not hear and did not try to hear, because some conversations were not his, even when everything else in the plaza technically was. Tyrion stood near Naruto with the air of a man who had several hundred things to say and was trying to determine the correct order. "Go ahead," Naruto said. "I don't know where to start." "The wildfire." Tyrion exhaled. "She had it placed before dawn." "I didn't know, if I had known I would have," he stopped. "I don't know what I would have done. But I didn't know." "I believe you." "The plaza would have." Tyrion looked at the cracked stone, the ring of displaced paving around where Naruto had stood. "You stopped it." "We stopped it," Naruto said. "And didn't explain the we, just let it stand." Tyrion looked at him carefully. "The thing inside you." "Yeah." "The thing Qyburn's instruments couldn't measure." "Yeah." A pause. Tyrion was assembling something, Naruto could see it, the careful construction of a man who thought architecturally, building a structure of facts and implications, testing load-bearing walls before he committed to a roof. What is it? Tyrion asked. Naruto looked at the sky for a moment. Then he said, in my world, a long time ago, before recorded history, mostly, there were creatures made of chakra. Pure energy, given form and consciousness. 9 of them. They each had a number of tails. He paused. The strongest had 9. It's called the 9-tailed fox. The Kyuubi. In my world, it's the most powerful thing that exists. Tyrion was very still. The day I was born, Naruto said, it attacked my village. My father, the 4th Hokage, the leader of our village, he stopped it by sealing it inside me. He said it the way he always said it now, not with the weight it had carried when he was 6, or 12, or even 17, but with the plain factual ease of something that had been carried long enough to become just another true thing. That's what I've been carrying my whole life. That's what Qyburn's instruments were reading. Tyrion processed this. His face went through several things: disbelief, reassessment, the specific expression of a man checking his model against the evidence and finding that the evidence fits better than he'd wanted it to. And it's sentient, Tyrion said. Very, Naruto said. And it's currently. Listening to this conversation, Naruto confirmed. Hello, Kurama said, aimed at nobody who could hear him. And you and it are cooperative partners, Naruto said. It took a while to get there. But yeah. Tyrion looked at the cracked stone. At the faint steam still rising where the wildfire energy had dissipated into the earth. At the plaza where 10,000 people had been standing 5 minutes ago. You contained the wildfire, he said. Together. Together, Naruto said. That could have, all of them. Tyrion's voice was quiet. Not theatrical, just the specific quiet of someone processing how close a number of people had come to not existing anymore. The whole front of the crowd. The September. Half the street behind it. I know. And you, Tyrion. Naruto looked at him. I know. That's why we stopped it. That's what we do, that's what we've always done. You protect the people who can't protect themselves. He said it simply, without performance, without the chest-out delivery of someone announcing a moral principle. Just said it, like it was a direction you walked in. That's all. Tyrion looked at him for a long moment. You're 19 years old, he said. Almost 20. You are, Tyrion said slowly, extraordinarily strange. Yeah, Naruto agreed. I've been told. Qyburn came across the plaza with his hands visible and his posture deliberately non-threatening, which on him was somewhat undermined by everything else about him, but the effort was noted. He stopped at a respectful distance and looked at Naruto with his gray, precise eyes. You quieted my subject, he said, indicating the creature that was still sitting on the cobblestones near the scaffold ruins, now apparently asleep. The wrongness had faded further while Naruto and Tyrion were talking. Kurama had apparently kept working at it from the inside, slowly and steadily, the way he did things when the goal was healing rather than impact. Your subject was in pain, Naruto said. Qyburn absorbed this. You can sense that. Yeah. And the mountain? Naruto looked at Ser Gregor, still standing in the middle of the plaza. Same thing. What was done to him is deeper. Harder. He paused. What did you do to him? Qyburn was quiet for a moment. I saved his life, he said. He was dying. What I introduced into his system, the treatment, it changed him, yes. Perhaps more than I intended. But he was dying. And now he's something else. He is alive. He's alive, Naruto said, and everything that made him himself is underneath something you put on top of it. He looked at Qyburn steadily. Is that better? For him. Qyburn had the expression of someone who had asked themselves this question and had gotten an answer they hadn't fully liked. He has no pain, he said. That's not an answer to the question I asked. Qyburn looked at the mountain for a moment. The mountain looked back at nothing. No, Qyburn said quietly. I suppose it's not. He turned back to Naruto. Can you do for him what you did for the other? Not quickly. And not completely. Naruto studied the mountain. The treatment is too integrated. Pulling it out cleanly would take time and would change him significantly. What comes back might not be what was there before. What was there before, Qyburn said carefully, was not particularly pleasant. No, Naruto said. But it was his. He looked at the scholar. You should think about whether you get to make that decision for someone else. Qyburn was quiet. Why did you refuse her? Naruto asked. At the end. When she asked you for something else. The scholar looked at the dais, where Cersei and Jaime were still sitting on the steps, the conversation between them continuing in whatever direction it was going. She asked me to trigger the second cache, Qyburn said. Beneath the main street. Larger than the first. He paused. I told her it wouldn't work. Which is true. Given what I'd observed of you and your, he chose his word carefully, partner. The containment you demonstrated would have handled it. That's why you refused. Naruto said. Because it wouldn't work. That is the reason I gave her, Qyburn said. He held Naruto's gaze. It is one of the reasons. He's being honest, Kurama said. As honest as he can be about something complicated. What happens to you now? Naruto asked. Politically. Given today. Qyburn's expression shifted, a small, private thing. I expect my position here is, he considered, transitional. My value to the Queen was contingent on my being useful in situations like today's. I was not useful. He looked at his hands, the scholar's hands, precise and careful. I don't think I've felt that particular brand of not useful before. He searched for the word, instructive. You're smart enough to do other things, Naruto said. Most of the things I know how to do are adjacent to today's business, Qyburn said, with the wry candor of a man acknowledging his own profile accurately. I have a particular set of skills that are not easily redirected. Everything can be redirected, Naruto said. That's kind of the whole thing I do. Redirection. Qyburn looked at him. Something in his gray eyes shifted, not warmth, exactly, but its neighbor. You are, he said, unlike anything I have studied. Yeah, Naruto said. I get that a lot today. It was Mira who found him first among the ordinary people. The crowd had mostly gone, the plaza reduced from 10,000 to a few dozen who hadn't left yet, some curious, some still processing, some of the gold cloaks who had received no orders and were waiting for some. Mira came from the side street where she'd been standing since the beginning, and she walked straight to Naruto with the specific, focused directness of someone who had decided to do something and was going to do it before they lost their nerve. She stopped in front of him. She was small, the 15-year-old servant from the Red Keep, in her plain working dress, standing in a plaza with cracked cobblestones and the fading residue of multiple impossible things. She looked at him. Are you all right? She said. Naruto looked at her. Of everything that had happened in the last hour, for reasons he would have had to think about at length to explain, this was the thing that got through. Not the wildfire, not the mountain, not Cersei on the dais steps. This small, direct question from a girl who had no power in this city asking it anyway. Yeah, he said. I'm okay. Are you? I'm fine. She looked at the cracked stone. I saw what you did. With the ground. You felt it. Everyone felt it. Like the world pushed back. She looked up at him. My mother said that once, when she was small, she said there was an earthquake and the whole city shook. She said it felt like the ground reminding you it was alive. That's not a bad way to put it, Naruto said. She looked at the creature sleeping near the scaffold ruins. Will it be all right? I think so. Eventually. She nodded. She stood there for a moment in the way of someone who had said what they'd come to say and hadn't quite decided whether to leave yet. Then she said, people were saying, some of the guards, before all this, they were saying the queen was right to have you killed. That you were dangerous. That you'd hurt people. She paused. You could have, couldn't you? Hurt people. Yeah, Naruto said. But you didn't. No. She nodded again, with the simple, weighted finality of someone filing something important away. Then she went back to the edge of the plaza and disappeared into the side street, and Naruto watched her go and felt something that had no clean name, the particular significance of being seen accurately by someone who had every reason not to trust what they were looking at. She's going to tell people, Kurama said. Yeah, Naruto said. That's the point. Jamie found him at the edge of the plaza as the afternoon sun started its descent, throwing long gold shadows across the cracked stone. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was still in the early, raw minutes of living with it. He'd been sitting with Cersei for the better part of an hour and something in that conversation had settled on him, not heavily, not crushing him, but present. The way significant things settled. She's going to her chambers, he said. She won't see anyone. Naruto nodded. She's not, Jamie stopped, started again. She's not broken. She's regrouping. She'll come back at this from a different angle. I know. I'm telling you because you should probably leave the city. Probably, Naruto agreed. Jamie looked at him. That's not a yes. I'm thinking about it. What is there to think about? She tried to execute you. She tried to burn half the plaza. Jamie's voice had an edge in it, not at Naruto. At the situation. At the accumulated weight of the morning. There's nothing here for you. There might be, Naruto said. He looked at the city. The rooftops, the towers, the life of it moving on the other side of the plaza walls. This city has a problem. The city has many problems. It's built on fear, Naruto said. Not just Cersei, she didn't build it, she inherited it and reinforced it. The whole structure of this place runs on keeping people afraid. And people who live in fear, he paused. They stop being themselves. They make choices they wouldn't make otherwise. They let things happen to them because they can't imagine it being different. He looked at Jamie. I've seen what happens when fear gets dismantled. When people realize they don't have to be afraid anymore. He paused. It's a good thing. It takes time. But it's a good thing. Jamie was quiet. You've been living in it too, Naruto said. The fear. Just a different kind. Jamie's jaw tightened. Don't, I'm not accusing you, Naruto said. I'm observing. He turned to look at him directly. You've been afraid of what happens if you stop being useful to her. Afraid that the oath and the title and the white cloak are all you are. Afraid that the thing you did, he stopped. Jamie went very still. You don't know about that. I know enough, Naruto said. I know you killed a king. I know everyone calls you Kingslayer like it was the worst thing anyone ever did. And I know from the way you looked this morning, when she reached for that torch, that you know exactly why you actually did it. The silence between them was dense. Jamie stared at him with the expression of a man who had been carrying something under everything he wore for 20 years and had just been asked about it in a plaza, in daylight, by someone who had no earthly reason to know and somehow did anyway. Wildfire, Jamie said, very quietly. The Mad King, Naruto said. Jamie exhaled. Long, slow, controlled. He had caches. All through the city. He was going to burn it all, every person in it. He said if he couldn't have it, nobody would. His voice was level. He'd had 20 years to make his voice level about this. I killed him. I drove a sword through his back and I killed him. And everyone who wasn't in that room decided I did it for ambition or cowardice or treachery. The levelness cracked slightly, at the end, around the word treachery. Nobody asked why. Nobody asked why, Naruto said. No. And you never told them. Jamie looked at him. Would you? If you did the necessary thing and everyone had already decided what it meant. Naruto thought about it honestly. About the things he'd been accused of. About the times when the explanation would have been true and correct and would not have been believed. No, he said. Probably not. Pride's a real thing. Pride, Jamie said, with a short, sharp sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Yes. She was going to do the same thing today, Naruto said. Cersei. She reached for the same solution the Mad King reached for. Jamie was quiet for a long time. The gold afternoon light moved across the plaza. Somewhere in the city, life was continuing, the sounds of King's Landing going about its business, indifferent to the fact that it had nearly not existed an hour ago. She's not him, Jamie said. No, Naruto agreed. She's not. She stopped. He paused. You stopped her. Jamie looked at the dais steps. At the torch still lying where it had fallen. I said her name, he said. That's all I did. Sometimes that's all it takes, Naruto said. One person saying the right person's name at the right moment. He picked up a piece of broken paving from the cracked ring around where he'd stood. Turned it in his hand. That's not nothing. That's the kind of thing that matters. Jamie looked at him with those eyes that had spent the whole day resolving a question. The question, Naruto thought, was now resolved. Not into an answer exactly, more into an acceptance that the question was legitimate, that it was worth sitting with, that living with an unresolved question was more honest than forcing a clean answer onto something complicated. Where will you go? Jamie asked. I need to find the rift, Naruto said. The one I came through. There's a trace of it somewhere, the energy leaves a mark. I've been feeling for it since I arrived. He looked at the harbor, visible between the buildings at the plaza's edge. It's somewhere near where I came in. The bay. You're going to walk into the bay. Swim, probably. He almost smiled. I'm a decent swimmer. Jamie almost smiled back. Almost. If she sends people after you, she won't, Naruto said. Not today. She needs today to settle. He put the piece of paving down. And I think you might have a conversation with her tonight that matters. What makes you think that? Because you've been having one kind of conversation with her your whole life, Naruto said, and today broke the frame it was running in. That kind of break, he paused. That's when the conversations that actually need to happen become possible. Not comfortable. But possible. He looked at Jamie. Don't waste it. Jamie looked at him for a long moment. Then he extended his hand, not the sword hand, the other one. Naruto shook it. The grip was firm, even, the handshake of a real fighter who had learned that honesty existed in how you held someone's hand as much as in what you said. Naruto Uzumaki, Jamie said. You are the strangest thing that has ever happened to this city. I've heard that too, Naruto said. He didn't leave immediately. The sun was still an hour above the horizon and there were things to do before the bay, and the first of them was Tyrion, who found him near the September steps with a look that said he'd been waiting. Walk with me, Tyrion said. They walked, through the side streets off the plaza, into the quieter lanes of the upper city, away from the gold cloak presence and the residue of the morning. King's Landing in the afternoon was a different city from King's Landing in a crisis. The streets had their ordinary life running through them, and the contrast with the plaza was the contrast between what cities were built for and what they got turned into by the people running them. She'll recover, Tyrion said, as they walked. She always does. If you leave, if you disappear back to wherever you came from, she will reframe today as a managed withdrawal. A tactical concession. She'll find language for it. Good, Naruto said. Tyrion looked at him. Good. If she can frame it in a way that doesn't break her, she's less dangerous than if she can't, Naruto said. Broken powerful people are worse than intact powerful people. I don't want to destroy her. I want to stop what she was doing today and then leave. Tyrion was quiet for a moment, processing. Most people who had been through what you were through today would want revenge. I've met revenge, Naruto said. I know what it does. He glanced at Tyrion. It eats the person carrying it. I've watched people who built their whole lives around it. None of them got what they were actually looking for. What were they looking for? To not be in pain anymore. He paused. Revenge doesn't stop the pain. It just gives the pain something to do. He stepped around a cart being pushed across the lane. I'm not in pain. She tried to execute me, she tried to burn the plaza, and I'm not, it doesn't hurt. I'm just done here. Tyrion walked beside him and didn't say anything for a moment. You are, he said finally, going to leave a very significant hole in the political landscape of this city. What do you mean? The crowd today. Tyrion glanced at him. 10,000 people watched a young man in orange stand on a scaffold and tell the truth and refuse to be killed and stop the city from burning. That has implications. The kind of implications that don't go away when the person involved does. Naruto thought about this. Is that a problem? Not for you. Possibly for Cersei. Possibly for the next person who tries to hold this city through fear. Tyrion paused. Possibly for the people who decide, having seen today, that things can be different. He looked at the street around them, the ordinary people, the ordinary life. You demonstrated something today that this city has not been shown in a very long time. What? That power doesn't have to be cruel, Tyrion said simply. That's actually quite radical here. Naruto looked at the street. At the faces. At the ordinary, daily human business of survival and commerce and connection, going on in the lanes of a city that had nearly been on fire an hour ago. It shouldn't be radical, he said. No, Tyrion agreed. It shouldn't. They walked in silence for a moment. The city breathed around them. What will you do? Naruto asked. After today. What I always do, Tyrion said. Try to prevent the next disaster. Fail partially. Succeed slightly. Drink wine in the intervals. He paused. With somewhat more information than I had yesterday about what's possible. That counts, Naruto said. High praise, Tyrion said dryly, and there it was, the wry warmth that lived under everything Tyrion did, the quality that Naruto had liked from the first conversation in the small room off the main corridor. I want you to know, Tyrion said, more quietly, that I will tell this story accurately. Whatever happens, whoever asks, I'll tell it as it happened. You don't have to, I know I don't have to, Tyrion said. I want to. There are enough stories in this city that have been bent out of shape by the people with the power to tell them. He looked at Naruto. This one shouldn't be. They'd reached the end of the upper lane, where it opened onto a broad street that ran down toward the harbor. The sea was visible from here, a strip of silver at the end of the downhill road, the afternoon light on it. This is where I leave you, Tyrion said. Naruto stopped and turned to face him. Tyrion Lannister, half the height of most men in his family and twice the intelligence, stood in the lane with his wine in one hand. He produced it at some point during the walk without Naruto noticing, and looked up at him with an expression that had several layers and all of them were genuine. Take care of yourself, Naruto said. I usually do, Tyrion said. In the face of considerable opposition. He extended his cup. A farewell drink? I know you don't drink. I'm offering the gesture, not the wine. He lifted the cup slightly. To strange arrivals and stranger departures. Naruto looked at the cup. He lifted his own hand, nothing in it, just the hand, and matched the gesture. To that, he said. Tyrion drank for both of them. It seemed appropriate. The red keep sat above the city in the late afternoon light, its red stone going deep orange, the towers throwing long shadows. In her chambers, Cersei Lannister sat at her window and looked at the city that was hers, that had always been hers, that she had fought for and killed for and burned for, and did not think about the morning in the way that would have required acknowledging specific things. She thought about it in the way she thought about everything, laterally, architecturally, from the outside. What had happened? What had not happened? What it meant? He had not hurt anyone. That was the fact that kept returning, the fact she hadn't planned for and couldn't dismiss. Every opportunity, every provocation, he had redirected, contained, moved around. He had stopped her wildfire from killing half her city. He had stopped her wildfire from killing half her city. She pressed her fingertips against the cool stone of the windowsill. Power doesn't have to be cruel. She hadn't heard him say it, she'd been in her chambers by then, but Pycelle had. And Pycelle, useless as he was in most respects, had an excellent memory for things said in his presence. He'd told her. Verbatim. She sat with that. Jaime came in without knocking, because he never knocked, because he was the only person in the world who had never been required to knock. He sat in the chair near her window and looked at her and didn't say anything for a moment. He's going, Jaime said. I know. To the harbor. She nodded once. He says there's a rift, Jaime said. That he came through something. A tear in the world. He's going back through it. Good, she said. And meant it, and didn't mean it, and the complexity of that bothered her in the private way that complex feelings always did. They were evidence of a weakness in her architecture, places where the wall had developed cracks she hadn't intended. He stopped the wildfire, Jaime said. He wasn't accusing. He was just saying it. Making it present in the room. I know what he stopped. Cersei. She looked at him. He was looking at her with those eyes that had looked at her his whole life, and there was something different in them today, something that had been resolved. She didn't know yet what had been resolved, or in what direction, but it was resolved, and the resolution had something to do with the morning and something to do with a conversation he'd had with the stranger in the plaza, and she was going to have to deal with what that meant eventually. Don't say it, she said. I'm not going to say anything you don't already know, Jaime said. She looked back at the city. He was right, she said, very quietly. About the fear. She paused. I know he was right. I've always known the city runs on fear. I chose it. Not because it was the only option, because it was the most reliable one. She paused again. Reliable until it isn't. Jaime was quiet. He's the first thing I've been afraid of that I couldn't manage, she said. The word cost her something. Every other threat, every other danger, there was always a move. Always an angle. He had no angles. He wasn't, she stopped. He wasn't playing the game, Jaime said. No, she said. He wasn't. They sat in the quiet of the window, the city below them, the sun going down. What do we do now? Cersei asked. And it was unusual, she asked it genuinely, not rhetorically, the question of someone who had lost their map and needed a moment to admit it before drawing a new one. Something different, Jaime said. Probably. She almost said something sharp. Then she didn't. She looked at the harbor, the silver strip of it visible from this height, and watched, distantly, a small figure moving through the harbor streets toward the water. Orange. Unmistakable. She watched until she couldn't see it anymore. The harbor at evening was quieter than the harbor at dawn. The day's commerce was settling, the fishing boats coming in, the merchant ships sitting still at anchor. The water was going gold and deep blue in the fading light, and Naruto walked to the end of the longest dock and stood at its edge and looked out at the bay. He felt for the trace. It was there, he'd known it was there, had felt its edge for days, a faint residual energy in the water where the rift had sealed behind him. Like a scar on the air. Not open, not active, but present, the kind of mark that dimensional travel left, that someone who knew what they were feeling for could find. Can you open it from here? Kurama asked. I think so. He reached for it, carefully, with the same precise chakra control he'd use for any delicate technique. It's thin. Whatever opened it originally, there's still a channel. I can widen it. How long? Few minutes, if I focus. He sat down on the end of the dock, cross-legged, and closed his eyes. Nobody's following me. How do you know? I can hear everyone within 300 yards. No gold cloaks. No King's Guard. A pause. There's a fisherman about 50 yards that way who's been watching me since I sat down. Hostile. Naruto opened one eye. The fisherman was middle-aged, rough-faced, sitting in a small boat tied to the next dock over, watching with the undisguised curiosity of someone who felt he was owed the entertainment after a long day. Your pal, Naruto said. The fisherman blinked. How'd you know that? You were out here when I came through. Naruto closed his eye again. You told people and nobody believed you. A long pause. That's right. For what it's worth, Naruto said, you saw exactly what you thought you saw. Another pause, longer. Then, I knew it. He sounded genuinely satisfied. I bloody knew it. Naruto smiled with his eyes closed. Ready? Kurama said. Ready. He focused. The chakra went outward, not in the fighting direction, not down into the earth as it had gone during the wildfire, but outward across the water, spreading thin and precise, reading the surface of the dimensional membrane the way you might read a wall for hidden doors. The trace was there, faint but findable. He pushed. Not hard, gently, the way you open something old and sealed without breaking it. The membrane resisted, then gave incrementally, the way stiff hinges gave when you applied steady, patient pressure. He felt it begin to separate, the seam reappearing in the evening air over the water, and the blue-white light started, faint at first, then brighter, the familiar crack in the air opening over the bay. Behind him, on the dock, he heard Pell say something in a voice that was entirely reverent. It's open, Kurama said. Fully open. I can feel our world on the other side. Can you? Yes. It's home. Something in his voice. Warmth, enormous and simple. It's home. Naruto opened his eyes. The rift was there, 6 feet of crackling blue-white above the water, pulsing steadily, the light it through making the evening bay look like something from a dream. Through it, barely perceptible, the energy of his own world pressing back. The chakra signatures of the Wind Country's desert. The particular quality of Konoha's forests. He stood. He looked back at King's Landing. The city climbed its hills in the fading light, red stone and fire and the full complicated human mess of it, the cruelty and the beauty and the fear and the ordinary life running underneath everything. The red keep at the top, its windows lit. The great September beside the cracked plaza. The harbor streets and the docks and the fishing boats and the merchant vessels. Somewhere up there, Tyrion with his wine and his intelligence and his relentless, battered determination to be the voice of sense. Jamie sitting at a window having a conversation that had been overdue for 20 years. Mira going about her evening work. Pycelle locked somewhere with his useless certainty. Qyburn in whatever space he retreated to when he was thinking. Qyburn's creature, sleeping in the cracked plaza, a little less wrong than it had been this morning. And Cersei. At her window. Watching the harbor, maybe. Looking at the thing that had come through and couldn't be controlled and hadn't, in the end, needed to be. Any regrets? Kurama asked. Naruto thought about it honestly. No, he said. But I wish she'd chosen differently. People choose what they're built to choose. Until something changes the building. Today might have changed some of it, Naruto said. For some of them. Tyrion, Kurama said. Jamie, Naruto said. Mira, Kurama said, and it was fond, and it was the fox acknowledging that the small things mattered as much as the large ones. Yeah, Naruto said. Mira. He turned back to the rift. Hey Pell, he said. Yeah. The fisherman's voice was still slightly reverent. Tell the story, Naruto said. Accurately this time. All of it. A pause. Nobody'll believe me. Tell it anyway, Naruto said. The right person will, eventually. He stepped off the dock. He walked on the water, the last time, in this world, the chakra light from the rift catching on the bay's surface around his feet, and moved toward the crackling seam in the air. The light was warmer as he got closer, the warmth of his own world on the other side, familiar and specific and entirely home. Kurama, he said. What? Thank you. For today. A pause. Long enough to be the pause of something that didn't receive thanks easily and was taking the time to receive it properly. You don't have to thank me, Kurama said. We both know what we did today was, I'm thanking you anyway. Another pause. Then, in the voice that Kurama only used when he meant something completely, without the armor of irony that he wore everywhere else, you're welcome. Naruto stepped through the rift. The blue-white light closed behind him. On the harbor, Pell sat in his boat and looked at the empty air above the water, where the light had been and now wasn't. The evening was quiet. Somewhere in the city above, life was continuing in all its complicated, difficult, occasionally extraordinary ways. He picked up his oar. He started thinking about how to tell the story. Chapter 6. After the ash, the ravens arrived at Dragonstone 3 days after King's Landing stopped making sense. There were 6 of them, from 6 different sources, and no 2 of them told quite the same story, which was how Jon Snow knew that all of them were probably true. Fabricated reports were consistent, they were built by one mind with one agenda, and they fit together too neatly. These 6 messages read like 6 people describing the same thing from 6 different angles, each one leaving out what they hadn't personally witnessed and including details so specific they couldn't have been invented. He read them all twice, standing at the window of the Dragonstone war room with the sea wind coming through the open stone arch, and then he set them down and looked at Daenerys across the table. She was already looking at him. A man fell from the sky, Jon said. Several people say that, yes. He stood on a scaffold in front of the Great September and defended himself in open court. Against fabricated charges. He redirected the mountain through 30 feet of plaza. Twice, according to the second raven. Jon picked up the third raven's message. He stopped wildfire. Daenerys was quiet. Underground wildfire, Jon said. Already ignited. He drove it into the earth somehow and it didn't take. He set the message down. And then he walked into the harbor and disappeared through a tear in the air. That's what 6 separate ravens say, Daenerys confirmed. And Cersei tried to execute him publicly and it, Jon looked at the messages, failed. Completely. In front of 10,000 people. Yes. Jon looked at the sea. The waves were dark and consistent, the particular gray of the narrow sea in the morning, whitecaps far out. He thought about what he'd just read the way he thought about everything, directly, without the political filtration that most people applied to information, which was one of the things that got him into trouble and also one of the things that occasionally got him to the right answer. Tyrion sent the 6th raven, Daenerys said. She picked up the last message. He was there. He saw everything. What does he say? She read it. Not aloud, not immediately, she read it through once and her expression shifted in ways that Jon had learned to read, not because she showed much but because he'd learned the small vocabulary of what she did show. Something in the message surprised her. More than the events themselves, something specific surprised her. She handed it to him. He read it. Tyrion's handwriting was small and precise, the handwriting of a man who had written a great deal and had learned efficiency. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The first described events, compact, accurate, the summary of a trained observer. The second was the paragraph Jon read twice. Whatever he was not a threat in any meaningful sense. He had every opportunity to level this city, I mean that precisely, not rhetorically, and he did not. He stopped wildfire with his body and redirected it into the earth at cost to himself. He quieted something Qyburn had built that was causing significant harm. He spoke to the crowd with complete honesty and they listened in the way that crowds listen when they believe the person speaking. He was 19 years old and he was more in command of himself than anyone I have seen in this city, including several kings. If you encounter what he left behind, and I believe you will, approach it carefully. Not because it is dangerous. Because it matters. The third paragraph was a single sentence. He told me he was going home. I believe him. But what he was, and what he demonstrated is possible, does not go home with him. Jon set the letter down. What does he mean, Daenerys said, about what he left behind? They sailed for King's Landing 4 days later. Not with an army, with a delegation. Jon's suggestion, Daenerys' agreement, the specific kind of decision that both of them were better at making now than they had been a year ago. The city had just been through something that had fundamentally rearranged its understanding of power, and arriving with a fleet and a dragon would have been the wrong message in the wake of a man who had refused to hurt anyone. Though Daenerys did bring Drogon. Not above the city, above the sea, circling, visible if you looked up. Which was, Jon thought, about as restrained as Daenerys got with Drogon, and he appreciated the effort. King's Landing from the harbor approach looked the same as it always did, the city on its hills, the red keep at the top, the walls and the towers and the dense sprawl of life between them. But something was different about it in a way that was difficult to specify from the water. It took Jon a moment to identify what it was. It was quieter. Not silent, the harbor was busy, the dock sounds of any working port, voices and cargo and the regular noise of commerce. But underneath that, the particular background frequency of a city that ran on managed tension, the low, constant note of fear that people who lived inside it stopped hearing but outsiders felt immediately, was different. Not gone. But changed in pitch. Like something had interrupted it and it hadn't quite resumed the same way. You feel that? Jon asked Davos, who was standing beside him at the bow. Davos tilted his head. Yeah, he said, after a moment. Like it's, breathing different. Jon nodded. The dock they tied it was under a Lannister gold cloak presence, but lighter than expected, 2 men where there would usually have been 6, and both of them watching with the low-key alertness of people who had recently been through something that had recalibrated their alertness. They looked at Jon's party, 12 people, no weapons visible, no threatening formation, and at the Targaryen banner on the mast, and at Jon specifically, and made the same calculation that guards made everywhere when they had no orders covering the current situation. They let it proceed until told otherwise. Tyrion was at the harbor gate. He was leaning against the wall beside it with his wine and his particular air of deliberate casualness, and when he saw Jon he pushed off the wall and came forward with the expression of a man who has been waiting for something and is relieved it has arrived. Lord Snow, he said. Then, looking past Jon at Daenerys, who had come off the ship behind him with the specific, contained energy of a woman managing the impact of her own presence in a hostile city, Your Grace. Tyrion, Daenerys said. You look well, Jon said. I look like a man who watched the laws of nature get comprehensively rearranged 3 days ago and has been processing it with wine, Tyrion said. But I appreciate the kindness. He looked at both of them. Come. There are things you need to see and things you need to understand, and in my experience, the order matters. He took them to the plaza first. They came through the city on foot, Jon's preference, because you understood cities differently on foot than from a horse or a litter, you felt them with your boots, and the city did its thing around them. People recognized Tyrion and watched him with eyes that were different from eyes that watched a hand of the queen. Eyes that remembered something. People recognized the Targaryen banner carried by the guard behind Daenerys and stepped back in the instinctive way, but the step was smaller than it might have been, and some of them didn't step back at all. The streets in the upper city were different in one specific way. People looked up. Not at the sky, not at anything specific. Just, they had the habit of looking up now, recently acquired, the body posture of people who had learned 3 days ago that unexpected things could arrive from above and that the arriving wasn't necessarily the worst part. Tyrion noticed Jon noticing this. Perspective adjustment, he said. Takes a while to settle. The plaza had been partially cleaned, the scaffold debris cleared, the broken stone swept to the edges. But the crack pattern in the cobblestones was still there. It had to be, because the cracked stones were load-bearing and replacing them would take weeks, but Tyrion suspected that even when they were replaced, the pattern would be remembered. Cities had this quality, they held the shapes of things that had happened in them, in the way scar tissue held the shape of the wound. Jon stood at the edge of the crack pattern and looked at it. It radiated out from a central point in an irregular ring, not perfectly circular, slightly asymmetric, the way force patterns were when they interacted with ground that wasn't homogeneous. The cracks were deep. In the center, where Naruto had stood, the cobblestones had been pressed slightly down, as if something heavy had briefly been there in a way that stone registered differently from simple weight. Here, Jon said. Here, Tyrion confirmed. Jon crouched down. He put his palm on the cracked stone. It was cool. The morning light came across it at an angle that caught the edges of the breaks and made them shadow-defined. He felt nothing through his palm, which was what he expected. Whatever had happened here was past now. But the shape of it was present, and the shape was specific. This was not random destruction. This was not the footprint of something violent. This was the shape of something containing something else, holding it back, pressing it down, the ring pattern of inward-directed force. He stopped it here, Jon said. He drove the wildfire into the earth, Tyrion said. From this point. Both of them, him and whatever he carried. Both of them, Jon said. He told me what he carried, Tyrion said. Not in detail. But enough. He paused. The short version is, a creature of pure energy. One of 9, in his world. The most powerful. He paused again. Sealed inside him at birth. Working with him, not against him. Jon stood up. He looked at Daenerys. She was looking at the crack pattern with an expression he recognized, the expression she had when something resonated with her own experience in a way she was processing. She'd been quiet since the harbor. Quieter than usual. He'd been letting her process. He carried something that was feared by everyone around him, she said. Not to Tyrion. To the air, to the plaza. From birth. Yes, Tyrion said. And he had complete control of it. Complete, Tyrion said. And vice versa. It wasn't control, exactly. Partnership. They worked together. He paused. I watched him calm something that Qyburn had built, something unnatural, something in pain, just by standing next to it and putting his hand on it. Whatever he and the thing inside him did together, it was, he searched for the word. Corrective. Rather than destructive. Daenerys looked at the crack pattern for a long moment. Where did Cersei go? Her chambers. She hasn't emerged for formal business. Tyrion's voice was carefully neutral. She is, he chose, recalibrating. Is she dangerous? She is always dangerous, Tyrion said. Today she is dangerous and destabilized, which is a different problem from dangerous and confident. He looked at the red keep on the hill above them. She will see you. She has no choice. But I'd give her today. Daenerys nodded once. Jon was still looking at the crack pattern. Tyrion, he said, the letter you sent. The last line. About what he left behind. What did you mean? Tyrion looked at the plaza, at the crack pattern, at the scaffold clear space, at the great September rising above it all, and at the city visible in every direction from this high point. The city, and its particular frequency, changed now in the way that things changed when they'd witnessed something they couldn't unwitness. The crowd, he said. 10,000 people. They saw him stop wildfire. They saw him refuse to hurt anyone. They saw him speak honestly and directly to a crowd that had been managed by fear for years. He paused. They saw power used without cruelty. Which is, he stopped. Started again. There are things that you can show people that, once shown, cannot be unshown. You can convince them afterward that it was an aberration. You can tell them it was a trick. You can fill the silence with noise until the memory gets muddy. His voice was quiet and very level. But somewhere in the back of every mind that was in this plaza 3 days ago, there is now the knowledge that power doesn't have to work the way they've always been told it works. Jon looked at the crack pattern. At the city around them. That's what he left behind, Jon said. Yes, Tyrion said. And I think that was deliberate. Jon looked at him. You think he knew what it would do? I think, Tyrion said carefully, that he was the kind of person who understood that how you used power was a demonstration for everyone watching. Not a performance, but a demonstration. A proof of concept. He paused. He refused to escalate at every point where escalation was available. Not because he couldn't. Because he understood that the watching mattered. His eyes found Jon's. He is 19 years old. Almost 20, he kept insisting. And he understood that better than most people I have met in 50 years of watching power operate in this city. The plaza was quiet around them. The morning moved. Above the city, distantly visible, Drogon traced a slow arc against the sky. Jaime met them on the Red Keep steps. Not in full armor, the white cloak, yes, but the rest of him was dressed for utility rather than ceremony, and he had the look of a man who had not slept as much as he'd needed to but was operating at full capacity anyway, the way soldiers learn to do. He looked at Jon with the professional assessment of one fighter sizing up another, and at Daenerys with a more complicated assessment that resolved after a moment into the decision to simply treat her as what she was. Lord Snow, he said. Then, Your Grace. A pause. This is strange for me. Why? Daenerys asked. The last Targaryen I served killed 30,000 people to make a point, Jaime said. Directness as armor. I try not to use precedent as a guide, but you understand the hesitation. Daenerys looked at him for a moment. Tyrion tells me you've served men you had doubts about before. I've served men I had certainties about, Jaime said. Certainties in both directions. Then you understand what it costs when you're wrong about someone. Something in Jaime's face shifted. Yes, he said quietly. I do. So do I, Daenerys said. She moved past him up the steps. I'd like to see my father's throne room. Jaime watched her go. Then he looked at Jon, and Jon looked back, and between them was the particular silent communication of two people who had both been in positions of impossible loyalty and had both, at some point, had to redefine what loyalty meant. The man who was here, Jon said. Naruto, Jaime said. The name sat in his mouth with a particular weight, the weight of names belonging to people who had changed something. Tell me what he was like. Jaime looked at the sky for a moment. At the harbor, visible from the top of the steps. At the bay where the rift had opened and closed. Imagine, he said, someone who had every reason to be angry, not just today, not just here, but going back years, going back to the way he was born, and chose not to be. He paused. Not chose to suppress it. Chose not to let it be the thing he built himself around. Jon was quiet. He told me about oaths, Jaime said. Not directly. He asked about mine and then he said something about impossible choices, about when the oath can't be kept in the way it was written because the person who gave it broke something first. He looked at Jon. He knew about the Mad King without being told. Not the details, but the shape of it. He stopped. He saw clearly. Without noise. Is that unusual? Jon asked. In my experience. Catastrophically rare. Jaime looked at his hands for a moment. The swordsman's hands, the history written in the calluses. He made me think about things I hadn't thought about in years. He paused. He made Cersei, he stopped there too. She stopped, Jon said. That's what the Raven said. She dropped the torch. She stopped, Jaime confirmed. I don't know what it cost her. I don't know what happens next with her, and I've known her my whole life and I'm still not sure. But she stopped. He looked at Jon. He created the conditions where stopping was possible. That was, not an accident. Jon thought about this. About a 19-year-old from a world that didn't exist in any map he'd ever read, who had walked into King's Landing and spent 5 days being the specific, consistent, unmovable thing that it needed to encounter. He's gone now, Jon said. Yes. Jaime's voice was, not sad, exactly. The particular note of a man acknowledging that something genuinely good had been present and was now absent. He went home. Through a tear in the air. Through a tear in the air. Jaime almost smiled. I watched him walk on water to reach it. He looked comfortable. Like a man walking to a door he knew well. Jon looked at the harbor. Pell the fisherman was there, Jaime said. He's been telling anyone who'll listen. And some who won't. A pause. He's getting more listeners than he expects. Cersei received them at midday. The throne room was full Lannister ceremony, the gold and the red, the full display of institutional power, the Iron Throne itself at the back with its particular ugly majesty, the thing that had consumed so many people in the wanting of it. Jon had stood near it before and felt nothing particular toward it. He felt the same now. Cersei on the steps before it looked like Cersei Lannister at her most composed, which was her at a particular kind of most dangerous, the composed that lived after a significant recalibration, when the new model was still settling and the behavior hadn't fully adjusted to it yet. She watched them approach with eyes that were calculating and tired in equal measure. Daenerys walked up the aisle of the throne room with the specific quality of motion that was entirely hers, not performance, just presence, the presence of someone who had stopped apologizing for what she was and had found that stopping made the thing more visible, not less. She stopped at the appropriate distance from the throne steps. Cersei looked at her. A long moment. The two of them, the woman who had held this city by fear and the woman who had held a continent by will, both of them looking at each other across whatever distance the morning had made. My brother tells me, Cersei said, that you came without an army. I came with 12 people, Daenerys confirmed. And a dragon, at a respectful distance. The dragon was visible from the Red Keep. I know, Daenerys said. It was meant to be. I thought you deserved the honesty. Something moved in Cersei's face. The same thing that had moved when Naruto had said similarly direct things to her, Tyrion reflected from the side of the room where he stood with Qyburn and Jaime. The thing that moved when a person encountered honesty in a context where they'd been expecting strategy. I have conditions, Cersei said. I expected you would, Daenerys said. Westeros under a joint arrangement, we can discuss that. My position in this city, we can discuss that also. My family, yes, Daenerys said. All of it. I came here to talk, not to dictate. Whatever you may have expected from a Targaryen, I'm not interested in burning anything. She paused. As it happens, I'm not the most relevant example of that principle today. Cersei was quiet. He stopped your wildfire, Daenerys said, and her voice shifted, not softer, but more specific. A stranger. From another world. He stopped wildfire that you'd set and held the energy with his body. She paused. I have 3 dragons. I understand what it means to hold that kind of power. And I understand what it means when someone chooses not to use it. Cersei looked at her for a long time. He made me afraid, Cersei said finally. It was the specific sound of a truth being said that hadn't been said aloud before, and the room heard it as such. Genuinely afraid. Not of being outmaneuvered or overthrown. Afraid of, she stopped. Of what? Daenerys asked. Cersei looked at the throne. At the room. At the long history of this space and what had been done in it. Of being the thing I was accusing him of being, she said. The threat. The monster. She said it very quietly. He was standing on my scaffold in front of 10,000 people, and he was, not. And I was standing on my dais, and she stopped again. Nobody filled the silence. It needed to be its own shape. He told me, Cersei said, that he grew up as the thing that scared his entire village. That people crossed the street when they saw him. She paused. He said they were afraid of what he carried, not of him. But that he was the one they looked at. Jon thought about this. About what it was like to be looked at as the thing you carried rather than the thing you were. He had some experience with that from a different angle, the bastard, the crow, the man without a name that fit. He looked at Daenerys and thought she probably did too. He didn't do to you, Jon said to Cersei, what you were doing to him. No, Cersei said. He did not. She looked at Jon directly. I know what that says about me. It says you stopped, Jon said. You dropped the torch. Cersei's jaw tightened. My brother said something. Your brother said your name, Jon said. You stopped. That's not nothing. Cersei looked at him. The assessment she gave him was different from the one she usually deployed, not the one designed to find weaknesses, but the one that looked for something else, something harder to name. You're not what I expected, Lord Snow, she said. People keep saying that to me, Jon said. Tyrion, from the side of the room, made a sound into his wine cup. The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were not simple. Nothing between Cersei Lannister and Daenerys Targaryen was ever going to be simple. There were too many competing histories, too many genuine grievances, too many conflicting claims with legitimate weight on both sides. But they were honest. More honest than most of the negotiations this room had seen, because something had shifted in the person at the center of the Lannister position, and that shift had recalibrated everything around it. Tyrion was in the middle of it, where he always was, doing the thing he always did, finding the structure that both sides could stand on, building the bridge beam by beam, offering the wine that smoothed the moments that pure rationality couldn't smooth. He was better at it today than he'd been before, and he knew it, and the reason was specific. He'd watched someone demonstrate that honesty was a viable political strategy. Not naive honesty, the strategic kind, the kind that chose what to reveal and when, but never said anything that wasn't true. The kind that built credibility by being consistent. The kind that trusted the other person's intelligence enough to tell them the actual situation. He kept thinking about the scaffold. About the way Naruto had talked to the crowd, not manipulating them, not working them, just talking to them honestly about what was happening, and watching them respond to the honesty with the specific relief of people who hadn't been given honesty in a long time. On the second day, Jaime came to find him in the small council chamber where Tyrion was reviewing draft terms. He sat down. He looked at the documents on the table. He picked one up, read it without comment, put it down. She's going to sign, Jaime said. I think so, Tyrion agreed. It'll hold, Jaime said. The agreement. For a while, at least. Agreements hold as long as the people in them have more to gain from keeping them than breaking them, Tyrion said. I've tried to build this one so the math is correct on both sides. Jaime nodded. He was quiet for a moment. He said something to me, Jaime said. About the conversation I needed to have with Cersei. He said, when a frame breaks, the conversations that needed to happen become possible. Not comfortable. But possible. He said something similar to me, Tyrion said. About accurate information and good decisions. He paused. He was remarkably consistent. He was 19, Jaime said. Almost 20, Tyrion said dryly. Jaime looked at the window. At the harbor visible from it, the bay. Do you think he made it? He asked. Through the rift. Back to wherever he came from. Yes, Tyrion said without hesitation. How do you know? Because he was the kind of person who did what he said he was going to do, Tyrion said. He said he was going home. He went home. He paused. And because Pell saw it close. Jaime looked at the harbor. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I think so too. They sat in the quiet of the small council chamber, the city below them going about its business, the negotiations continuing in the next room. I've been thinking about the King's Guard oath, Jaime said, after a moment. Tyrion looked at him. He asked me about it. About impossible choices. About when the oath can't be kept in the way it was written. Jaime's voice was even, but it was the specific evenness of something that had been worked on rather than natural. He didn't tell me what to do with it. He just made it visible. The way it actually is, instead of the way I've been carrying it. And how have you been carrying it? Like a weight, Jaime said. Like a thing to be defended. Like the only definition of myself that still made sense after everything else. He looked at his hands. He said it's a hard place to live in. Carrying an impossible choice as your identity. Is he wrong? Tyrion asked. Jaime was quiet for a long time. No, he said. He's not wrong. He stood. I think I'm going to tell people. About the Mad King. About why. He said it the way decisions sounded when they'd been made at cost and were final. Not to be vindicated. Just to stop carrying it as something shameful. He looked at Tyrion. He carried something his entire village was afraid of and turned it into a partnership. The least I can do is, he stopped. Tell the truth about yours. Tyrion suggested. Jaime looked at him. Then he almost smiled, the real one, not the performance version. Yeah, he said. That. He left. Tyrion listened to his footsteps go down the corridor and thought about what it meant when a single person's presence in a place for 5 days could move so many pieces that had been fixed for years. He thought about the crack pattern in the plaza. He thought about the shape of inward-directed force. He thought about how the cracks were not damage, exactly, they were the trace of something being held. Something massive being contained and directed by someone who had chosen, specifically and deliberately, to contain and direct it rather than release it. The city hadn't been leveled. The city had been touched. Briefly. By something that could have destroyed it and hadn't. And the touch had left a mark that was not damage but was something else. The shape of a choice. The footprint of a refusal. It would be in the stone for years. Probably for generations. People would ask what made that pattern, what cracked the plaza in that ring, and the story would be told and retold and get larger in the telling and smaller in the details, and the essential truth of it would be, something came here that could have destroyed this place and chose not to. That was the crack pattern. That was what remained. On the third night, Tyrion went to the harbor alone. He went at the hour that Pell had said the rift had been, the blue hour, the last light, when the bay went the color of something between day and night and the water had its own kind of stillness. He walked to the end of the longest dock and stood at its edge and looked at the air above the water. Nothing there. No light, no seam, no trace. Sealed fully now, days passed. He stood there anyway. You were right about the record, he said, to the empty air above the water. I'm keeping it. Every detail I can remember. He paused. Jaime is going to tell the truth about the Mad King. Cersei signed the agreement this afternoon. Qyburn has stopped something. I'm not sure what, but he came to me today with a proposal about redirecting his research and he used the word corrective, which is a word I've never heard him use before. The harbor was quiet around him. The ships at anchor. The water. Mira, the girl from the kitchens, she's been talking. To other servants, to people in the lower city. About what she saw. About what you said to her. He paused. People are listening. The kind of people who don't usually get listened to, talking to the kind of people who don't usually get told the truth. It's a slow thing. But it's moving. He looked at the water. 10,000 people saw power not be cruel, he said. That's in them now. I don't know what they'll do with it. I don't know what it means for this city or this kingdom 5 years from now. But it's in them. He paused. That was worth whatever brought you here. Whatever the rift was, whatever dimension you fell from, it was worth it. He stood there for a long moment in the blue hour. Then he said, quieter, I hope your world is good to you. I hope the village that was afraid of you when you were 6 can see you clearly now. He paused. I hope the thing you carry knows it's valued. Another pause. I suspect it does. He turned and walked back up the dock toward the city. Behind him, over the harbor, the evening light moved on the water in the way that evening light moved, present and unheld, going somewhere, leaving the shape of itself in what it touched. In another world, in a village built among trees, a rift opened over the valley at dusk and deposited Naruto Uzumaki onto the roof of a building he recognized, in a neighborhood he knew, under a sky that was exactly the right color of his particular home. He sat on the roof for a moment. Kakashi-sensei would probably notice he'd been gone. Someone would have noticed. There would be questions, and the questions would require answers, and the answers would require explanations that were going to take a while. He wasn't worried about it. He looked at the village, the lights coming on in windows, the evening commerce, the particular familiar energy of Konoha going about its business. The forest of death visible beyond the eastern wall. The Hokage monument on the cliff face, his father's face carved into it alongside the others. Home, Kurama said. The same thing he'd said through the rift, the single warm word, enormous and simple. Yeah, Naruto said. How do you feel? Naruto thought about it. About King's Landing in the morning light and the scaffold and Tyrion at the dock and Jaime on the scaffold ruins and Mira in the crowd and Cersei on the dais steps with the dropped torch. About the crack pattern in the plaza and the wildfire going into the earth and the creature that had been made wrong and was a little less wrong by the time he left. About power that chose not to be cruel. About 10,000 people who now knew it was possible. Good, he said. I feel good. They'll be all right, Kurama said. The people there. You think? The small ones will be, Kurama said. The ones who don't have power. They usually are, if the people with power can be made to hesitate even once. A pause, and in it the weight of 9,000 years of watching human beings manage and mismanage themselves. We made them hesitate. We did, Naruto agreed. He sat on the roof a moment longer. The evening was warm and the village was home and there was a world a dimensional rift away where something small but specific had been different today than it would have been otherwise. He jumped down from the roof, landed in the street, and walked toward the center of the village with his hands in his pockets. Someone would be looking for him. There would be explaining to do. He was hungry. He thought about ramen. Hey, he said internally. What? Good work today. Kurama made the sound, the low, resonant, full-chest sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a growl but was entirely, specifically his. The sound of something ancient and immense and genuinely, honestly content. Obviously, he said. And then, quieter, you too. Naruto smiled and kept walking, and the village was lit and warm around him, and the evening was exactly itself, and somewhere else, somewhere over a different sea, under the same moon, a city that had almost burned was breathing differently, and a crack pattern in a plaza was already beginning to be a story. Stories lasted. Even when the people in them were gone, even when the world that held them was unreachable through any known road, the stories stayed. They lived in the people who'd witnessed them and passed through those people into the people who listened and from those into others and so on, the particular immortality that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with what power chose to do with itself. Pell would tell his story. Mira would tell hers. Tyrion would write his down, carefully and completely, and it would sit in a book somewhere in the Red Keep for years before the right person found it, and when they found it they would read about a young man who fell from the sky and refused to be afraid and refused to hurt anyone who hadn't come at him first and stopped wildfire with his body and talked to a crowd with complete honesty about what was actually happening. And they would read, in Tyrion's careful small handwriting, the thing that had happened to the stone of the plaza, and they would understand what the crack pattern meant, not destruction, but the shape of something held. Something that could have been everything, and chose, precisely and deliberately, to be only what was needed. Not a mark of power. A mark of restraint. The best kind.